Chapter 60, ch.60. Dumbledore was still missing from the staff table at breakfast the following morning as the owls delivered papers using banner headlines to proclaim Snape's fate. The fact that the former potions professor had shown genuine remorse had went a long way to deciding his future. There were large wounds in the wizarding psyche that Snape's revelations had pulled the scab off, exposing the rotting flesh underneath that needed to be cauterized. Neither was it felt the best use of a resource was to lock a potions master in a cell at Azkaban for a decade, rather make use of his talents to help those in need. Snape was sentenced to 10 years working in the potions research labs in St. Mungo's, spending his nights in a holding cell at the Ministry. They had also placed an annual review on his case to determine the impact he was having while researching cures for wizarding ailments. There was a possibility of early release, but should he breach the terms of this sentence, he had a 20-year stretch in Azkaban hanging over his head. The Potters were quite pleased with this solution. They didn't necessarily want Snape to die again, just be out of their hair. Hermione was just voicing her surprise that the Ministry had discovered the carrot and stick approach when her hand was a blur as she drew her wand. She'd caught sight of Dumbledore approaching Harry from behind. There was nothing she could do if the more powerful Dumbledore chose to act. It didn't mean she couldn't let him see she was ready for it though. He stood directly behind where Harry was sitting and theatrically cleared his throat. "Mr. Potter, I detect your hand in Severus's sentence and I would like to publicly say thank you." Hermione had her wand held at her side, though her words were as cutting as any curse. "We had nothing to do with it. Instead, my husband showed faith that those in power knew how to do their jobs and left them to get on with it. You should try that approach sometimes, headmaster." Albus ignored the young girl with the rose pinned to her robe. He'd heard the story of how a white owl had delivered them to her yesterday at breakfast. Instead he spoke directly to Harry. "You have displayed great maturity in dealing with these difficult situations and I must commend you for it." The maturity comment had both Potters waiting on the hammer falling as they wondered if the old wizard had discovered their secret. Albus regarded this as a sign of encouragement, so continued to woo his prey. "I also feel that I must apologize for my behavior the other night. I hope you will accept it." Harry nodded, more in relief than anything else. Again Albus thought he was on a roll. "We apparently got off on the wrong foot and never seemed to recover. I'm hoping this will allow us to move beyond that and build at least a working relationship. Your treatment of Severus has shown your true, forgiving nature." Dumbledore realized he was laying it on a bit thick. He was counting on the boy being flattered enough not to outright refuse him in front of the entire Great Hall. This would give Albus the toehold he needed to start bending the boy to his will. Harry couldn't believe the arrogance of the old bastard and thought he'd better answer quickly before Hermione blew a gasket. "Mr. Snape committed crimes for which he showed genuine remorse and will now receive punishment for. I think his sentence is not only fair but fitting." This brought a smile to the face of Albus Dumbledore, blindly assuming he'd just been forgiven all transgressions against the boy. The part of the prophecy Snape had heard was accepted by everyone as having been fulfilled that Halloween night, only Albus knew different. With Severus also avoiding Azkaban, yesterday had went about as well as it possibly could for the headmaster. Now the way was clear for Albus to begin to become the boy's mentor and confidant. Harry's next words evaporated Dumbledore's hopes, exposing them for the mirage that they were. "You on the other hand have committed crime after crime, without displaying one shred of remorse. The laws of the land are not your own personal playthings, headmaster, something you can do as you please with, rather a set of rules laid down to govern us all. Surely as Chief Warlock and Supreme Mugwump you are aware of this." This was a rhetorical question that Albus had no intention of answering. He was too busy wondering just how much the Potters knew. Harry didn't keep him wondering for long. "You sentenced me to a decade in hell, an existence so bad that without my Hermione I would probably have walked in front of a bus to put an end to it. I now have a loving family and friends, something that you, and you alone, denied me of. A simple I'm sorry isn't going to cut it." Albus was now regretting his public play as the gasps of horror around him indicated who was being believed here. What more was he expected to do? Why couldn't the lad just do what Albus wanted him to do? After all, it was for the best. Dumbledore was finding it extremely difficult to play chess when the pieces suddenly had minds of their own and wouldn't follow his commands. He hadn't realized that Harry wasn't quite finished yet. You also played a major part in my godfather being illegally imprisoned for a decade, by actions and inaction you have cost us a combined total of 20 years. Neither Sirius nor I are vindictive though, we both feel that a 20-year sentence for you would be too harsh. Our lawyers tell us they are confident that by the time they're finished preparing charges, you'll see the inside of a cell for the next 10 years. Both Sirius and myself could live with that. Dumbledore stood rooted to the spot as the Potters and their friends headed off to class. The glances as they walked past left no doubts where their loyalties lay. Unfortunately for Dumbledore, it wasn't just the Gryffindors giving him dirty looks. Albus had never known children like these two and was at a loss on how to proceed. The mere fact that he, Albus Dumbledore, was talking to them should have seen the pair swooning to do his bidding. The lawyers were no idle threat. If they could prove any of their accusations, then Albus would be in a world of trouble. As the proof wasn't too hard to find, Albus had to get the Potters to change their minds. That was proving to be easier said than done. Quirrell had sat avidly watching the latest episode in the saga that surrounded the Potters, his master studying every nuance. There was now a realistic chance that they might permanently remove the old fool from the castle without him having to intercede. The biggest problem with that scenario was that Dumbledore was sure to take the stone with him. His plans were set for Halloween. Regaining a body exactly a decade after losing his own should empower his new one. Aided by one of the most powerful nights on the magical calendar, and Tom decided his original plan would stand, Halloween would be when the Dark Lord came out from behind this turban and Voldemort proudly stood once more. Chapter 61, ch.61. The Potters were about to leave for home after another busy week at Hogwarts, but they had a slight problem to deal with first, namely one Percy Weasley. The problem was not ensuring the redhead got what he deserved, rather they couldn't be connected to it and that it didn't screw up their other plans. With the map and cloak in Hermione's bag, they put their scheme into operation. The rest would depend on Percy. The silently following former prefect was well aware the Potters were due to leave for home, so when they started heading in the other direction, Percy knew they were up to something. As they headed toward for the forbidden third floor, a scenario began to take shape in Percy's mind. Catch them doing something they shouldn't be, and their little jaunt into London this weekend would be cancelled, due to their resulting detention. Penelope wouldn't then be spending the day with Wood, and Percy might even get his precious prefect's badge back. When he heard the girl speak, his mind was instantly set. Thoughts of Penelope on his arm and a shiny badge adorning his lapel saw Percy throwing any doubts into a cold, dark, lonely corner. "Are you sure about this, Harry? We could be killed, or even worse, expelled." Harry was desperately trying not to laugh as his wife was making faces at him while she spoke those words from another life. "Hermione love, when have I ever led you wrong?" The young girl's harumph could clearly be held around the corner by the stalking redhead. Wand in hand, Percy sprang into action, only to find himself faced with an empty dead end. The only escape was the slightly open door. Thinking that the time for caution was long gone, Percy burst into the room with a curse already on his lips. It was to Percy's great misfortune that was where the curse stayed, due to being hit with a wandless silencing charm as he passed an invisible Harry Potter in the corridor. Percy's entire universe had shrunk to 3 sets of staring eyes and the fang-filled slobbering jaws underneath them. He slowly and very carefully retraced his steps, away from the now growling heads toward the door. Finding it not only closed but locked ended all rational thought, banging the door with fists and feet while silently screaming his lungs out for someone to save him. His vain attempts at escape and calling for help came to a painful and abrupt end. One set of jaws clamped on his shoulder while another grabbed Percy by the leg. He was up in the air still trying to scream when the tug of war was violently ended. The third set of jaws crushed his stretched torso as all 3 heads now fought against each other over this tasty morsel. Percy was ripped to pieces, though mercifully was dead before this happened. The Potters entered with Hermione's little jewelry box playing green sleeves for some unknown reason. Harry was gazing in astonishment at all the mess when his wife promptly added to it. The sight of all the blood combined with the horrendous smell saw Hermione barf everything she'd eaten since the day she was born all over the room. Harry was by her side in an instant, supporting her as the dizziness threatened to overtake Hermione. Harry led her back outside the room before she even realized. Only when her lungs drew in air that wasn't tainted by the smell of blood and ripped intestines did Hermione's eyes come back into focus. She decided there and then that she'd rather face her death by Dementor. Anything was better than that. "Oh, I'm sorry, Harry, I just couldn't." Harry gently placed his finger on his wife's lips to prevent her saying any more. "Hermione, put the cloak back on and check the map. I have to go back in there and need you to stand guard." Normally this would have drawn a different response from Hermione, this time she could only look toward her husband with gratitude. She didn't think she could go back in that room today. Harry worked quickly, using his wandless magic he soon had the entire room clean. Any leftover Percy was transfigured into fertilizer and made its way down the hatch to a welcoming devil's snare. In less than 10 minutes there was no sign Percy had ever entered the room. This was necessary to preserve their other plans. Chapter 62, ch.62. If it were discovered that a student had met their death in here, Dumbledore would be arrested, the stone would be removed and Riddle fade back into obscurity. This was not what they wanted, so Percy had to disappear. With the castle-wide excitement over the trip tomorrow, he probably wouldn't even be noticed as missing tonight. When he couldn't be found and with no traces of foul play, Percy would hopefully be classed as a runaway. Harry left the room to find an anxious Hermione waiting on him. They stayed under the cloak until escaping from the castle, therefore not having to explain to anyone why Hermione was chalk white. They were through the gates and on the path to Hogsmeade before Hermione gave a voice to what was on her mind. "I'm sorry, Harry, I thought I was stronger than that. I'm even beginning to doubt if we're doing the right thing." Harry was not about to let Hermione think she had failed him, it just wasn't possible for his wife to do that. "Hermione, there is no shame in being upset at a sight like that, you're still the strongest person I've ever known. Remember, this wasn't just the man who passed sentence on us, he was also waiting in ambush the other night. If there has to be blood splattered all over the walls, then I would just as soon make sure it's not ours or anyone we care about." Harry now had his arm around his wife. "You know I would do anything for you, but please don't ask me to spare Ronald Bloody Weasley. I don't know how I would react to that, or even if I could let him live." Hermione leaned into him as the couple made their way toward the village. "I think it was just the shock, Harry. We've both seen more than our share of death, but that was something else. We engineered the whole event and Percy never stood a chance." Harry squeezed her shoulder that his arm was already around. "That's the way it's supposed to be, Hermione, only a fool gives the bad guys a chance. We take them out coldly and cleanly." "Well, all right, I suppose that wasn't very clean. Harry, how can you try and joke about this? I'm worried we may be going dark and you're trying to insert humor into a situation that doesn't have any." Harry stopped and turned his wife around to face him. "Do you think Voldemort or his Death Eaters lose their breakfast every time they kill someone? I will never go dark as long as I have you, your love wouldn't allow it. By the same token, I will not be able to rest until those who did you harm have been made to pay. That Ronald still draws breath is only sufferable because I know it won't be for much longer." It was a thoughtful Hermione who answered as they continued their journey. "I'm glad we decided not to deal with Ginny. I don't think I could have done that. It's going to be hard enough spending the weekend with her while knowing we arranged Percy's demise." Harry had to agree with her on that point. "I know the timing couldn't have been worse, but it was Percy who forced the issue. Ron was supposed to have been first until he tried to ambush us the other night. We've discussed this on many occasions, love, though I will admit seeing the result is an entirely different matter." Intellectually, Hermione was aware Harry made sense. These people had hurt them before and seemed only too willing to do so again at the first opportunity. It was the sights, sounds and especially the aromas that made it oh so real, no longer a mental exercise in meticulous planning. Ron was scheduled to meet a similar fate. With Ginny becoming their friend, the dynamics of their revenge was changed. His death would have to look like an unfortunate accident, preferably an accident they appeared to had nothing to do with. Even the magical world weren't stupid enough to believe two Weasley children running away. Hermione wondered if Ginny would be so quick to offer hero worship if she knew the truth. "I know you're right, love, but that won't help me when I have to face Ginny shortly. They'll both be waiting for us in the leaky cauldron with Mum." Harry was desperate to cheer her up, so changed his intentions there and then, hopefully giving Hermione some time to herself, and a soak in the tub at home would see her feeling better before tonight. All he needed now was for Mum to be quick on the uptake. Harry wasn't expecting any trouble with that, since neither of the Granger women could ever be accused of being slow. Fleeing to London found them once again with Emma Granger's arms around them. Harry certainly thought he could get used to this. After also greeting both their excited friends, Harry sprung his surprise. "Mum, could you take Ginny and Luna shopping and we'll meet you back at the house? I have a little something for Hermione's birthday that she'll be able to show you once we get there." Emma had instantly noticed her daughter's demeanor when she exited the flue. If she didn't know better, she would have suspected they'd had a massive fight. The way Hermione was clinging on to Harry dispelled those thoughts before they could take root. "Harry, you got me Crookshanks, sent me roses and have organized this whole weekend. I feel as if you're spoiling me." Harry gave her a quick peck on the cheek. "You deserve it. What I'm after will mean a quick trip Gringotts, and we'll make our own way home from there." Emma could read the pleading in Harry's eyes, so played along. She would hear the explanation later. "Okay girls, have either of you been to Harrods before?" Two blank looks drew a smile from Emma. "Oh good. I guarantee you will enjoy this." They had spoken about getting the girls some Muggle clothing for the weekend, and especially for the trip on Saturday. Originally Harry and Hermione were going to accompany them. Emma understood it must be serious for them to pull out. Emma led both girls to the car as Harry and Hermione left for the alley. Ginny was a little disappointed that Hermione headed off with Harry. That disappointment ended the instant she laid eyes on the biggest bloody store she'd ever seen. Chapter 63, ch.63. The entrance alone was enough to take her breath away. By the time she found herself and Luna being shepherded into the changing rooms with a selection of new clothes, Ginny was actually shaking. Little Ginny Weasley had never had anything that wasn't at least second-hand, pre-owned as the shops were now calling it, but it didn't lessen the stigma of being poor. Ron hated it when he received something that had been passed down from his brothers, but Ginny would have preferred that. At least he knew where it came from. It wasn't that Ginny was a materialistic little girl, more the result of a particular nightmare that had haunted her since she was about 7. Ginny was walking down a busy Diagon alley when a young girl's voice rings out loud and clear, "Oh look Mummy, that little red-headed girl is wearing my old dress." This led to a flood of little girls taking back all the clothes Ginny was wearing, leaving her standing in the middle of the alley in only her knickers. It was totally illogical, absolutely mortifying, and woke her up sweating and in tears every time. Here was this practical stranger, buying her new clothes and taking them into their home for a weekend. Ginny began to understand why Hermione was the extraordinary young witch she was. With Emma Granger as her mother, she couldn't really be anything else. Both girls were being given the opportunity to see firsthand how this family operated. Ginny was probably looking forward to that as much as any of the adventures they had planned for the weekend. Luna's reactions were slightly more complicated. She really liked Emma and loved to shop. While her father hadn't a clue how to shop for a little girl, being here with Emma was reviving some bittersweet memories of afternoons spent with her mother. It was never about what dress or blouse they eventually returned home with, more about enjoying each other's company and spending girl time together. Those were some of the best memories Luna had of her mother, and she didn't need to stretch her imagination any to see her mum and Emma being very good friends. It would appear to Luna that friendship with Harry and Hermione came with an admission to their family included. This was a whole new experience to Luna, and one that she certainly welcomed. Emma was also enjoying herself, the expressions of wonder and awe as both girls stared in astonishment at the most common of things had her chuckling in amusement. When they headed off to the changing rooms with a couple of pairs of colored jeans and a few tops each, Ginny had appeared ready to pass out. As fun as this was, Emma just wanted to have a talk with Hermione. Something had clearly happened and Emma was desperate to know what. Harry had placed a specific order with a jeweler the day he bought Crookshanks. it was now time to revisit the shop. He was going to wait until Monday morning, but Hermione needed cheering up now. Hermione soon found herself being presented with a black velvet box. On opening the lid, she discovered a bespoke piece of jewelry that sent her pulse racing. It was a gold heart-shaped locket that had 2 sets of the intertwined initials HJP carved into it. The initials surrounded a diamond that sparkled in the center of the piece. It was exquisite, and Hermione fell in love with her gift immediately. "I know there is probably loads of jewelry in our vault that now belongs to you. I wanted this piece to be something special. I wanted to give you something no one else has. My heart is your heart in this world and the next." This earned Harry a kiss before Hermione gushed, "Oh Harry, it's so beautiful and I love it. Could you put it on for me please?" Harry knew he should have spoken to Hermione about this next bit, but didn't think he was going to be in too much trouble. "In a moment, love, we need to go to Gringotts first. The goblins have been carrying out a special job for me and this is part of it." Half an hour later, Harry and Hermione portkeyed into their bedroom in Crawley. His wife had a thoughtful expression on her face that usually meant there was something she didn't quite understand. "Would you care to explain to me just how the goblins were able to turn my necklace into a reusable portkey that takes us directly into our bedroom?" Harry decided it would be better if he only had to do this once. "Let's go downstairs and I'll explain it to Dad at the same time." Why they were home before Mum, and by extension what happened to Percy, were the stories that had to be told to Dan and Sirius first. Then it was time for Harry to come clean. "In the Muggle world, Mum and Dad are going to become my legal guardians. In the magical world, as usual, it's very different. Both come under the protection of House Potter, namely Hermione and me." Hermione was becoming impatient. "Not a good sign." "I know this, Harry. It still doesn't explain the portkey into our room. To accomplish that degree of accuracy, the goblins would need to have an intimate knowledge, not only of the location but the building as well." As usual, his wife was correct. She was just missing the obvious. "The goblins do know the exact location of this house, right down to every piece of furniture in it. At my request, they warded the entire house." Dan didn't know what Harry was talking about, leaving him unsure whether to be happy or angry. He glanced at Hermione for a further explanation. She was staring at Harry with an expression torn between wonder and love. "Thanks, Harry. Dad, it basically means the house is protected against intruders, fire, that kind of thing. Knowing my husband like I do, I would be willing to wager this is the best protected house in England, if not the entire UK. He would have paid for the best where you and Mum are concerned. I now have a beautiful necklace that will take us directly from our bedroom to just outside the Hogwarts wards. That should save someone having to continually drive us to and from London." Dan was in agreement with his son-in-law. When it came to the safety of his girls, then money was no object. He still dreaded to think how much Harry had spent protecting a house they would be moving out of soon. "Harry, while we're on the subject of guardians, our lawyers inform us that the unopposed custody hearing will be Tuesday morning. They don't foresee any problems but would like you both to be there in a just-in-case basis. It should be a mere formality, but why take a chance when we don't have to?" The smile that crept over Hermione's face was terrifying. "Good, then I can start on those bastards. It's time for some payback on the Dursleys for all the abuse they heaped on my husband." One glance told Harry it was a lost cause, though he felt obliged to make the attempt. "Sweetheart, is that really necessary? I'm quite happy knowing I never need to see them again." If Hermione had used this expression earlier, they wouldn't have needed a music box. Fluffy would have taken one glance and then been found cowering in a corner. "Did you honestly think I was going to let people who were deliberately cruel to my husband just walk away without being made to pay? You obviously don't know me as well as you think you do. I have a few things in mind and have yet to decide which, or even how many of them I will use on the Dursleys." The tone of Hermione's voice caused an involuntary shudder to run down the three males' spines. "Now I'm going to have a relaxing herbal bath. I would prefer to smell of rosemary than Percy's remains." They all watched as Hermione climbed the stairs before Sirius felt obliged to say something. "After hearing how you pair dealt with Percy Weasley, I had already made my mind up never to mess with you two, but Merlin, Harry, your wife is one scary girl. I think I might actually feel sorry for the Dursleys." Dan wore an expression that matched his daughter's from a moment ago. "Don't waste your sympathy, Sirius. I saw the cupboard they forced Harry to live in. Hermione has my complete approval and support for anything she does to those animals. The only reason we didn't involve the police was to get Harry out of there as quickly and cleanly as possible. After Tuesday, when Harry legally joins our family, the gloves can come off as far as the Dursleys are concerned." Sirius was looking at his godson strangely, wondering how Harry turned out the way he did after being raised like that. Harry decided to follow his wife up the stairs. "I just hope Hermione remembers we plan to use the Dursleys against Dumbledore. I would rather see him get what's coming to him than the Dursleys." Sirius waited until his godson had left before asking Dan the obvious question, "Do you think he stands any chance of changing her mind?" Dan snorted, "Not a snowball's chance in hell." Chapter 64, ch.76. Charlie read Percy's journal and reached the same conclusion as everyone else. His younger brother had done a runner. Minerva gave him the journal to forward to his parents. Perhaps they could draw some comfort from it while the search for their son continued. The former student and his head of house spent so long chatting. McGonagall invited him to stay for lunch. This would also give him the opportunity to talk with his three brothers. Ginny had provided so much information that Charlie was having difficulty believing it all. The Potters had bought the burrow but had paid a very fair price for it and then apologized to both Weasleys who lost their jobs. There was so much contradictory information concerning the Potters that Charlie would actually like to meet them. He headed toward the Great Hall beside his favorite professor. It seemed to the dragon handler that this was his day to be shocked. The Gryffindor Quidditch captain was sitting at the Ravenclaw table chatting to an attractive girl. There were Slytherins, Puffs, and Claws sitting at the Gryffindor table while the youngest Weasley male sat beside a Malfoy at the Slytherin table. That last one was the biggest shock of all for Charlie. Minerva couldn't help but notice Charlie's shock as his eyes scanned the hall. She also couldn't help but smile at the positive changes slowly creeping into Hogwarts. She was a great believer in a student's house being their family, but that didn't mean they couldn't be friends with people outside their family. There was even a rumor that one of her young cubs was dating a Slytherin. Apparently Minerva was as surprised at the news as young Mr. Longbottom. Miss Bulstrode though looked quite at home sitting right next to him at the Gryffindor table as she ate her lunch. Charlie found the twins' stories matched Ginny's while Ron's outlandish claims that the blame for everything bar the canon's usual run of form lay at the Potter's door. Charlie's raised eyebrow toward the other two had George defending the Potters quite vociferously. "Both Ron and Percy have some problem accepting the Potters, we don't. They were in the company of at least one Weasley since leaving Hogwarts after their last class on Friday." Fred took over seamlessly from his twin. Ginny and Luna met them in the Leaky Cauldron. They then went shopping with Emma while Harry was buying Hermione her birthday gift. They were all out together on Friday evening to a fancy restaurant and we spent all Saturday with them. George gave Charlie his thoughts. Percy had this whole ideal life planned for himself. It wasn't much of a plan if losing your prefect's badge ruined it. Ron here is also building his own little fantasy world. Have you seen who he hangs about with? His group insults the Potters and their friends every chance they get, so much so that the five of them are practically ostracized by the rest of their year group. Fred agreed with his twin. Ron sees Harry's money, fame, youngest seeker in over 100 years and instantly becomes a jealous arsehole. Harry and Hermione are great and our Ginny thinks the world of them, only Ron here and Malfoy think badly of the couple. Brilliant company to be in their little brother. Despite Ron's protestations, the elder Weasley was convinced. He glanced over at the two kids who were surrounded by their friends and could see why Ron was jealous. The Malfoy boy was sitting being ignored by everyone and looking seriously miffed about it. Why Ron had aligned himself with that hated family was a mystery to him. It was time to head back to London and check on any progress the Ministry may have made in their investigation. Zeno had offered him a bed for the night which he gladly accepted. Not only would he get to spend more time with Ginny but could put off seeing Muriel until tomorrow. That was a win-win scenario as far as Charlie Weasley was concerned. Harry had forgotten how much he loved playing Quidditch. or how much of a taskmaster Oliver was. Feelings of guilt about almost certainly not being available for the match were quickly quashed by the image of another Hogwarts Quidditch captain lying dead in a cemetery. Cedric's life and Hermione's health were way more important. When he had originally accepted the position, they had intended to be here. For Harry to withdraw now would immediately lead to questions being asked. These were questions that they certainly didn't want to answer, so he was forced to continue as normal. The practice ended and Harry flew down to the waiting Hermione, riding his new Nimbus 2000. Sirius bought him after hearing Harry made the Quidditch team. Hermione surprised him by jumping on the back and wrapping her arms tightly around his waist. "What? We still need to get outside the wards, and this sure beats walking home, James." Harry couldn't help but laugh at her chauffeur comment. He answered yes ma'am before flying off toward the edge of the wards. They waved to Remus on the way past before landing to use the porte-carte. The three occupants of the house heard the laughter the moment they arrived in the bedroom. The couple walking down the stairs was quite the sight. Seeing his godson in Gryffindor Quidditch robes, his racing broom in one hand and his girl on the other arm, warmed the marauder's heart. "Merlin, Harry, you've never looked more like your father than you do at this moment. You know we'll all be coming to see you play, against Slytherin too. I can't wait." Harry hated doing what he was about to do, as he hadn't seen Sirius this excited ever. "Sirius, you might have to wait. That game is scheduled for November the 9th, we hope to be in Australia by then." As much as Sirius was deflated, Dan and Emma were over the moon. "What made you change your minds?" Emma asked. "If we can pull off what we're attempting, I want to take Hermione away from here. Whether it's a holiday or becomes something a bit more permanent is something we should decide as a family once everything has settled down a bit." Harry could see the disappointment written all over his godfather's face, so decided to throw the old dog a juicy bone. "Sirius, we have a vitally important task that we would like your help with. It's safe to say the entire outcome will depend on it." Sirius was now very interested, feeling like a spare wheel was not something he enjoyed. Hermione sealed the deal when she showed concern over his health and abilities. "Sirius, this could be very dangerous. If you don't feel ready for this task, then you honestly have to tell us." The big kid just rolled his eyes. "Guys, I'm ready for anything. What do you need me to do?" Harry laid it out for him. "Lucius Malfoy has something we need very badly. Whatever it takes is worth it, providing you don't end up back in Azkaban. He's an evil, lying, conniving bastard, so you need to be careful and not dick around with this." Harry had told him how his cousin got the better of him while Sirius was trying to be too clever. Lucius had to be taken very seriously. "All our plans require that diary to be in the hands of the goblins. If it can be accomplished before Halloween, I'll even get Padfoot is the greatest tattooed on my bum. That will be right next to Hermione is better, dear." Harry gave a very audible gulp in pretense he was scared of his wife. "I was planning on having that on my chest, right over my heart, dear." Dan couldn't hold his laugh. "Oh, good save there, Harry." Sirius wasn't laughing. The thought of taking on Lucius Malfoy had focused his mind like nothing before. The plans currently racing through his head were getting wilder and more outlandish, but still they weren't quite right. Nothing less than total humiliation was good enough for the head of the Malfoy family. His grin was feral as Hermione added on another task. "Sirius, if you could free our friend Dobby at the same time, I might just have to get matching tattoos with my husband." The wicked glint in his eyes boded ill for the blonde Death Eater. "I'll do better than that, consider it a late wedding present." All four could see the vitality almost flow back into the Marauder. Not only was he able to be useful again, they were trusting him with something of vital importance. Sirius Black was back in the game and Lucius Malfoy's days were numbered. Chapter 65, ch.64. Luna couldn't help but smile at how happy her best friend appeared. Ginny was sitting on the other side of Hermione and wearing the new party dress that Emma had bought earlier. She looked ecstatic. Luna was also wearing a new party dress and sitting beside Harry at a table that was positively groaning with wonderful food. Hermione apparently had no close relatives and no other friends she wished to invite, This left the 4 youngsters and 3 adults at a table in the birthday girl's favorite Italian restaurant. Luna had at first thought the food looked too good to eat. Her first mouthful told her how ridiculous that idea was. She quickly decided Italian cuisine was her new favorite thing. Luna noticed Harry watching her. He smiled before leaning over and whispering in her ear. "This is why you're such a good friend, Luna. Apart from not having a jealous or deceitful bone in your body, your friend's happiness means more to you than your own. Never doubt that Hermione and me will always want your friendship and will try to be the best friends we can in return." Luna's smile probably outshone Ginny's as she answered her new friend, "Thanks, Harry, you have no idea what that means to me." Harry put his hand on her arm. "Trust me, Luna, we both do. It's been very difficult for Hermione and me to make friends, though I know we've made some really good ones now." The sparkle in Luna's eyes had nothing to do with light reflected off the candles on the beautiful birthday cake that the waiters delivered to their table. Sitting in a restaurant with friends managed that effect all by itself. Sitting here singing happy birthday to a new friend made Luna Lovegood a very happy young witch. Oliver Wood was also very happy. He was spending tomorrow outside the castle in the company of a lovely young woman. McGonagall's assurance that the boy who organized the event was not only superb seeker material, but was prepared to play for Gryffindor, set Oliver's heart racing almost as much as thoughts of Penny. The only cloud on Oliver's horizon was the empty bed in their dorm. Percy Weasley was rapidly becoming a right bloody jealous prat. Oliver had never expected the prefect's badge, being more than happy to be Quidditch captain. His first night of rounds with Miss Clearwater had gone some way to have him revaluating that opinion. Percy's jealousy couldn't have been more pronounced if he'd taken a full-page ad in the Prophet to announce it. Oliver was of the opinion that was Percy's tough shit. Sometimes during a Quidditch match the game could throw your team an advantage. His job as captain was to ensure his team grasped any advantage they could. The unattached Miss Clearwater had practically landed in Oliver's lap. He now intended to use every advantage he could to woo this lovely witch. If Percy was trying to screw up their day out tomorrow, then he was going to be disappointed. Oliver had no intention of playing his games and just went to bed early. The young wizard was hoping he dreamed about Penny again. Oliver Wood was discovering there were other things to do at Hogwarts that didn't require the use of a broom. He was looking forward to exploring the various cupboards where they were stored, though. Draco could only look on in despair as Slytherins sat at breakfast while dressed as Muggles, chatting away incessantly about the things they were going to see and do today. Adding acutely to the blonde Slytherin's displeasure was the letter he received from his father. Draco had been ordered to stay out of trouble and go nowhere near the Potters. It was beginning to appear as if the Malfoy name no longer carried the authority it used to. Unbelievably, it was Ron Weasley who sympathized with him. "Know exactly how you feel, mate. It turns my stomach to think the twins and Ginny are cozying up to those arses after what they did to our family. Dad also warned us not to cause any problems, but if you're hatching any plans, then I want in." Draco would have dearly loved to take Ron up on his offer but daren't. He didn't know how things worked in the Weasley family. With the Malfoys his father's word was law. Getting back at the Potters was very desirable, though his father's punishment for disobeying him certainly wouldn't be. Draco would just have to be a Slytherin and bide his time. "Potter's not worth my time. It's just knowing this lot are going to be even more hyper tomorrow. I think I'll be taking a lay-in and giving breakfast a miss." Ron watched the rest of the first years leaving the hall as he pondered Draco's words. Not getting back at Potter was bad enough, missing a meal because of it was just plain mental. Ron decided to seek out Percy to ask his advice, after another helping of course. Chapter 66, ch.77. Neville sat down to breakfast and was soon joined by Millie. "Morning, Neville, where's Harry and Hermione?" "Oh hi Millie, they have some business to take care of in the Muggle world. Hermione's parents are going to become Harry's guardians. You need to be at least 16 before you can marry there. This move will cover them legally and stop eyebrows being raised at them living together." Millie was thrilled. This was the most Neville had said to her so far. She had quickly recognized his almost paralyzing shyness for what it was, and her determination to coax him out of that shell of his seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. She'd known what Harry and Hermione were doing today, but Millie was resolved to use any tool or technique available to her in her bid to get Neville talking and comfortable in her presence. This was going to be a long-term project, but Millie was positive the results would be more than worth it. She may have been amongst the first to recognize the wizard that Neville could grow into, but she sure wouldn't be the last. Millie's plan was a fairly simple one: become Neville's friend, hopefully girlfriend, before the better-looking girls came sniffing around and she lost any chance she had. Nice guys like Neville were extremely hard to find. Hermione didn't waste any time in taking her boy off the market. Neville was also thrilled. He'd just managed to hold a conversation with a girl without stuttering, stammering, and generally behaving like the village idiot. He liked having Millie as a friend, but the girlfriend rumors and the accompanying teasing made him blush. Surely she couldn't be interested in him? It was also a revelation to be gently teased by his friends, a far cry from what he expected boarding the Hogwarts Express. Glancing around the hall, he could quickly see the trend that began after their trip to the theme park was not only continuing but spreading. People were sitting with their friends irrespective of house. The only table not to participate was of course Slytherin. It remained exclusively attended by students bearing green on their robes. There were 5 Slytherin first years spread over the other 3 tables, but no one else had risked sitting at their house table yet. Malfoy's almost permanent scowl and Weasley's eating habits might have had something to do with that, though. Millie asked Neville a question about his herbology homework and he agreed to meet her later in the library to help. Maybe she was interested in him as a boyfriend? Until he met Harry and Hermione, he'd never even had a friend before. His utter dread of rejection would probably mean Millie would need to ask him out. Neville, though, was totally unaware that Millie, being a very smart girl, had already figured that out. She would just bide her time and wait for the right moment. Harry was disappointed in the courtroom. Too many years of spying from his cupboard as his Aunt Petunia watched her legal dramas left him expecting more. There was no jury and the judge didn't wear a wig. As he was follically challenged, Harry thought this might have made Judge McGee appear a bit more impressive. Although this was Harry's first dealings with the Muggle legal system, he had been tried twice and instigated his godfather's trial in the magical world. Although the outcome of the last one was everything they could have hoped for, Harry was hoping for a bit less drama here today. Appearances were apparently deceptive as the balding, middle-aged judge missed nothing. He interrupted the Grangers' lawyer in mid-flow. "Mr. Wilkes, I am perfectly sure that the paperwork will have every T crossed and I dotted, but this is a child's welfare we are dealing with here. I have no intention of granting anything until I personally hear from the lad in question." Donald Wilkes thought this might happen. McGee was one of those judges who needed to see things with their own eyes. Although the case was unopposed, he still wanted to speak to Harry. "Your Honor, Mr. Potter is here now and more than willing to answer any questions you may have." Harry was wearing what he now considered was his lucky suit. It had been worn on the day Sirius gained his freedom and the bitch got her just deserts. He received hugs from all his family except Sirius. The Marauder didn't want to cloud the issue of his godfather sitting there and not applying for custody, so was currently in Gringotts on business. There was also the question of why he didn't intercede sooner that they really couldn't answer. Finishing with a hug and a peck on the cheek from Hermione, he made his way to the indicated chair, thankfully without the attached chains. He found Judge McGee's gaze to be penetrating but in a kindly manner. His whole purpose appeared to be ascertaining what was best for Harry. He couldn't say that about too many people he'd met in his life. "Harry, could you please introduce me to the people who accompanied you here today?" Harry imagined himself in this position when he was 11 and acted appropriately. "Oh, this is Mum and, sorry, it's MR and MRS, or should that be Drive and Drive?" Harry knew he was laying it on thicker than with a bricklayer's trowel, but was playing it for all he was worth today. The Mum and Dad slip had been deliberate, as was the doctor comment. This was something he really wanted. "This is Dan and Emma Granger, the young lady with them is my best friend Hermione." The joy on Harry's face as he spoke about his family couldn't be manufactured by the best child actors. The judge picked up on this immediately. "Would it be fair to say you like staying with the Grangers?" Harry adamantly shook his head. "No sir, I love staying with the Grangers." Like is reserved for less important things, bacon sandwiches and Coca-Cola. What it means to me to stay with the Grangers goes way beyond like. The sincerity in Harry's words shone through and had already made the judge's mind up on the placement. What disturbed him was why this case was uncontested. This was highly unusual given the child had stayed with the Dursleys for 10 years. Harry, I understand from the paperwork your aunt and uncle were as happy to see you go as you obviously were to leave. Could you please tell me in your own words what happened the day you left? Harry thought of the best way to put this across. Hermione has been my best friend for many years and I get on brilliantly with her parents. We were all sitting chatting when I let slip some facts about my living conditions at my aunt's. 10 minutes later I was in the Grangers' car heading over there. Since they claimed I was dumped on them, and they never wanted me in the first place, they couldn't wait to sign the forms. In my short time at the Grangers I've finally discovered what being part of a family feels like. The judge had been doing this for nearly 20 years and had developed a sixth sense when someone was spinning him a tale. Since his bullshit detector was currently sending out no alarms, he was left with the option that the boy was telling the truth. This was obviously not the whole truth, though it raised some other points that would have to be considered. Harry, I'm left thinking that your home life with the Dursleys was not all it should have been. I understand you have a cousin, this leaves me wondering if that young man is in any danger in that house. Harry tried not to laugh, he really did. It took a couple of minutes for him to regain his composure enough to be able to answer the judge. Sorry about that, sir. The only way my cousin would be in any danger in that house would be if he hurt himself in a temper tantrum. Even they are restricted to the odd occasion that he doesn't get his own way. As I've never seen one lasting longer than 2 minutes before his parents give in, the danger is minimal. The judge thought about this before deciding he would have them investigated anyway. Something didn't ring true here. He then passed one of the easiest judgments he'd done in a long while. Mr. Potter, I've rarely seen a boy more in tune with the people who've applied to be his guardians. I have no hesitation of awarding that right to the Grangers. The smiles coming from the now family of 4 illuminated the room. Chapter 67, ch.65. Excitement was also running high in the Granger household. Neither Harry, Sirius, Luna, or Ginny had ever been to an amusement park before. All were getting ready to head off toward London, joining the coach there with the rest of the group. Tonks was operating straight to Hogsmeade, allowing her to assist with the transfer to the Leaky Cauldron. They were as prepared as they could be. Piling into the Grangers' people carrier had Dan, ably abetted by Sirius, taking up the mantle of a big kid. He had the sing-song started before they left the drive. The party was in extremely good spirits as Emma drove toward London. The 5 Slytherins found themselves being accepted by the rest of the group. This was an unusual but welcome experience. Neville Longbottom summed up everyone's feelings very eloquently, "We're all just looking to enjoy ourselves today." The Hogwarts contingent had just begun appearing in the Leaky Cauldron when the Potters arrived with Luna and Ginny. Hermione was in her element issuing instructions. "My mum, Dad and Sirius are waiting for everyone on the coach. It's parked about 10 yards down the street. If you can start making your way there, we can soon be off." Fred and George exited the flue to squeals of joy from Ginny. She'd known Ron wasn't going to be there and hadn't even considered that the twins might be. Ginny was attempting to describe the last 24 hours in 20 seconds as the redheads laughingly made their way to the coach. Padfoot and Moony would be there. Hannah Abbott sat beside her best friend Susan Bones and was in total awe at the luxury Muggle coach. They were sitting in very comfortable seats, had adjustable air and electric lights above their heads while music played throughout the entire bus. She looked at a few faces and guessed the other purebloods were feeling the same as her. What did the rest of the day hold when the coach impressed the hell out of them? Emma was sitting beside Professor Burbage, trying to convince the woman of the best way to organize the day. "The whole point of this outing is to let the kids experience this for themselves. That won't happen if we lead them around by the hand all day. I understand that you're the one with the responsibility here, but these parks are very safe places. Once we're inside, let them wander around with their friends, set up a meeting point and we'll have a presence there on the hour throughout the day. We'll meet them all for lunch and then collect everyone when it's time to head for home. None of them are carrying their wands and, as long as they don't leave the park, will be perfectly safe. Charity was unsure. She had imagined leading all the kids around in a group, stopping at attractions to see who wanted to go on. Letting them loose to make their own decisions was a radical concept. Radical concepts were not something she was used to. Emma pushed some more. There will be thousands of people here, from all corners of the world. They won't stand out that much. They will make their way around the park in groups of friends, making their own choices and discovering things for themselves. This trip is supposed to be fun, but we all want it to be educational as well. The park has hundreds of staff, all trained to offer assistance to anyone who needs it. They will call for us on the public address system if there's an emergency. The thought of turning these kids loose was both terrifying and exhilarating to Charity. As a teacher, it is her job to impart knowledge into growing minds. The problem with her subject is that without experience it's meaningless. She could describe Muggle transport until she was blue in the face and not get the reaction that this morning's coach journey had provided. As a Muggle studies professor, she had often thought the few purebloods that took her class didn't believe a word she said. With her mind made up, Charity was wondering on the best way to inform the students when Emma handed her a microphone while the driver turned down the music. "What do I? Oh my! Can the whole coach hear me?" The question was directed at Emma, though when the entire coach shouted yes, Charity had her answer. "Okay, does everyone have their maps?" Another quick chorus of yes had Charity convinced she was doing the right thing, even by talking to them using a microphone instead of a sonorous charm. The children were learning without realizing it. That was the professor's entire reason for giving her enthusiastic support to the event. Time to let them know what was in store for them. "After we get inside the park, you will be allowed to explore as you want with your friends." Loud cheering forced her to stop for a moment. Clearly that was a popular decision. "We will determine a meeting point and show everyone where lunch will be served before you disperse. Most important rule: do not leave the park until it's time for us to return home." Chapter 68, ch.78. Albus felt a tightness in his chest as Remus escorted the Potter's lawyer into Hogwarts for their appointment with Minerva. The headmaster felt like a trapped animal, aware of the approaching storm but unable to do anything about it. All the experience and advantages he'd spent decades building had been whittled away until even his own students no longer respected him, far less held him in the reverence Albus felt he'd not only earned but deserved. He could find no trace of this mystery author who was writing a devastating expose of his life, nor it would seem do anything to stop both Potters and Black dragging him to court. The Potters had very effectively courted the support of the Ministry, the British wizarding public, as well as the staff and students of Hogwarts. Dumbledore was left not only without allies but facing trouble and condemnation no matter which direction he turned. It all hinged with the Potters. Albus could no longer think in terms of just Harry. That wife of his was as fierce as a tiger in defense of her mate, leaving the old headmaster with no idea where to turn next. He had cast his bait into the water and now, like fishermen the world over, was forced to sit patiently and wait for the fish to make its move. Albus was worried that any trial could see him out of the castle for a prolonged period. Leaving your hook unobserved was the surest way of losing your bait. In this high-stakes game he was playing, that was not an option he could contemplate. Albus decided to wait until Halloween before thinking of removing the stone from Hogwarts. If the Potters and Sirius Black were successful in the courts, then he didn't think he would be spending Christmas in the castle. He wasn't worried about being flung into Azkaban. Fawkes would have him out of there in a flash. His greatest concern was losing the position of headmaster. That would start the downward spiral toward becoming Albus Nobody. His biggest problem at the moment was not being in control of everything. This was something Albus had not experienced for many years, and he definitely didn't like it. At the moment he didn't even have control over his own destiny, far less anyone else's. No, Albus Dumbledore did not like this feeling one bit. Ron Weasley had to do something. His entire Hogwarts experience was turning sourer than last month's milk. He tried hard not to stare at how the rest of his year mates were spending lunchtime, talking, laughing and joking with each other. Comparing this to what he had available to him did not make for pretty viewing. Draco was so insanely jealous of Potter that he wouldn't actually speak of it, only his father's direct orders stopped the blonde boy from plotting some form of revenge. Pansy was Pansy, the only thing she was interested in was Draco. Crabbe and Goyle were harder to get a read on, that could be because there was nothing there to actually read. Ron couldn't spend the next 7 years like this. He never expected to be the center of attention, but to be sidelined and completely ignored was as unexpected as it was unacceptable. Again his mental focus shifted to what the redhead attributed the root of all his problems to, Potter. He needed something to bring the golden boy down a peg or two, just to let everyone see their idol wasn't perfect. Ron decided the hat must have placed him in Slytherin for a reason. It was time to be sneaky about the situation. One gesture wasn't going to turn this around, but any dent in the Golden Git's shininess would be a start. He then had a brainwave, challenge the arse to a duel at midnight. Not only would he be safely tucked up in bed, he would make sure Filch and that bloody cat of his were lying in wait for them. A spell of detention should tarnish the gloss of Mr. Perfect and spoil any plans they had for the weekend. It wasn't much, but at least it was a start. His pause for thinking over, Ron went back to what he does best, eating. Chapter 69, ch.66. This was greeted by blank stares of incredulity. Why the hell would they want to leave this park of wonders? If all Hogwarts rules were like that one, they would never be in trouble because no one would ever break them. Some more instructions, followed by a totally needless enjoy yourselves, had everyone cheering again. Harry approached Dean and gave him a plain wallet containing cash in sterling. I know both you and Seamus are used to handling cash, but the girls aren't. This is in case you want a hot dog, drink, or even a souvenir of the day. The rides are free and lunch is provided. Harry left some dumbstruck Gryffindors to repeat the scene with Justin from Hufflepuff and the Ravenclaws, Terry and Mandy. He then approached Tracy. I can give you guys a wallet or you can hang out with us. I know how scary it can be getting thrown headfirst into a different culture. Without Neville's help, Hermione and me would be lost. After excitement, the next strongest emotion amongst the 5 Slytherins was fear, fear of the unknown. Harry had just offered them the chance to put an end to that, so they quickly accepted his offer. Fred and George were chatting animatedly with Sirius and Remus. The snorts of laughter would have some Hogwarts professors worried. After handing a wallet to the twins and Oliver, Harry sat down beside an excited Hermione. She was patiently attempting to describe why the log flume was her favorite ride to Neville. Their friend couldn't quite decide whether Hermione was teasing him or actually serious. The idea that you sat in a hollowed-out log, which then shot down a slide into cold water, sounded scary enough. That you were then soaking wet and this was supposed to be fun left Neville almost convinced she was joking. Almost. It was with wide eyes they entered the park. The entrance really was beautiful and surrounded by enticing shops. After ensuring they knew what the schedule was and the location of the restaurant for lunch, the kids were released. They disappeared so fast they could have operated. The 6 adults were all standing there and it was left to Sirius to ask the obvious, guys, what do we do now? Emma grabbed him by the arm and started leading him away toward the nearest ride. We have some fun. As the rest were having a good giggle at his expense, Emma used the opportunity to have a quiet word to Sirius. Every ride we go on today, you sit beside Charity. The blank expression left Emma needing to explain further. If you're sitting with Charity, Dan's sitting beside me, who does that leave? Sirius now wore a wry grin. Emma, if I didn't require Mooney's permission as well, you would be indoctrinated into the Marauders today. That's brilliant, sneaky as hell but still brilliant. Neville was very nervous as the contraption closed down over his shoulders. The seats were aligned in pairs with Ginny and Luna in the front, Harry and Hermione behind them. Next came Neville, who found himself sitting beside Millicent with Tracy and Daphne behind. Theo and Blaise were bringing up the rear. As it clicked shut, it was a now extremely nervous Neville Longbottom who spoke to his friend in front of him. Hey Harry, is it supposed to make that noise? No idea Neville, never been on one of these before. What, this was all Neville managed to say before a siren sounded and they shot out of there at great speed. Harry, and everyone else, heard Neville screaming the entire way around the ride. What they didn't know was that most of it was down to Millicent grabbing his hand and squeezing it in a death grip, almost breaking the poor boy's fingers. Luna had been so happy that she and Ginny just met the height requirements, now the terrified girl wasn't so sure. As the ride was coming to an end, the screams became cries of laughter, almost relief that they'd survived. Luna finally got the point of these rides. Although you were perfectly safe being strapped to your seat, it sure didn't feel safe as you were twisted and turned at breakneck speed. Luna was the first pureblood to grasp the concept of a thrill ride, she wouldn't be the last though. Neville was delighted it was over only to discover there was further torture in store. Harry had just bought pictures of them all on their first roller coaster. Neville was at least pleased to see he wasn't the only one screaming though Millicent hadn't uttered a sound, she'd been too scared to scream. She also hadn't let go of Neville's hand since they got off the ride. Originally it was by way of an apology and to try to get the blood flowing back into his fingers again. Now it just felt nice. Oliver Wood didn't think this day could get any better. Seeing Penny in Muggle clothing instead of Hogwarts robes was a real eye-opener. He now had a full day of her company without even the professors to keep an eye on them. Fred and George thankfully took the hint early on and left the couple alone. Penny held on to his arm to steady herself after leaving a particularly wild ride and kept hold of it as they walked around the park. Could this day get any better? Oliver was forced to concede the answer to that was yes. Going on the river rapids and seeing Penny in a wet t-shirt was a standout memory for him. Getting straight to the point, he asked Penny to be his girlfriend before lunchtime. She happily said yes. Susan, Hannah, and Ernie were happy to let Justin guide them around the park. The rides were fabulous, but what really impressed Susan was the brilliant organization behind it all. Chapter 70, ch.79. Harry was also having lunch, sitting in a very nice restaurant with his new legal guardians, his godfather, and of course Hermione, his wife, who wouldn't tell him what she was cooking up that required the help of the goblins. While Harry had been at Quidditch practice last evening, Hermione had used the map and cloak to remove a certain item from the room of requirements. After handing Ravenclaw's diadem over to Barkhoke for removal of Voldemort's Horcrux, she had casually said that the matter she had written to him about could now proceed. It had been a very busy meeting with Barkhoke confirming that the purchase of the Gaunt and Riddle land would go ahead within days. He also provided brochures of plots of land for sale in their preferred Australian locations. Hermione's attempt to slip that past was caught by her husband. Between her refusal to tell him what she was up to and the constant wait-and-see reply from Sirius regarding his plans for the diary, Harry would normally be working himself into a strop. This was not a normal day though. Today he never had to see the Dursleys ever again while Mum and Dad officially became just that, Mum and Dad. Nothing was going to spoil his good mood today, especially since he was conducting his own correspondence with the goblins. He was just sneakier about it. Both Harry and Hermione felt a bit like jugglers as they tried to keep their eyes on everything that was happening around them. They agreed though that this was so much better than bumbling about with only the meager clues Dumbledore saw fit to drop in their direction. It was also important to them that they did not step over the line where they were manipulating people. Remus and Tonks aside, they were letting people see different options and allowing them to choose for themselves. He was glad his theory about Dumbledore appeared to be correct, that of a powerful old wizard living off his past glories. He hadn't taught a class for 45 years and his contact with students appeared to be observing them at mealtimes. No wonder he had a hard time understanding two Muggle-raised students. The old wizard may be a powerful genius, but his eccentricities would have generated multiple alarms in the Muggle healthcare system. The alternative to this view would mean Dumbledore was aware of far too much to remain a light-sided wizard. Harry's treatment at Privet Drive, Quirrell, the Basilisk, Sirius being innocent, Crouch Jr. and that bloody tournament were just some of the things that sprang to mind. If Dumbledore was the all-knowing, all-powerful wizard he tried to portray himself as, these events must have been at least known, if not engineered by the headmaster. Dealing with one Dark Lord was quite enough without having another orchestrating events from the wings. Yes, they intended to ruin Dumbledore's reputation, but when the alternative was watching him die, Harry had no qualms about what they were doing. He was also delighted to see the change in Hermione since they decided they would be heading out of the country after Halloween. Knowing she didn't have to face Ginny after Ron's date with the troll had brightened her mood considerably. Whether the move became permanent would depend entirely on the British magical community. They had provided some nudges and even downright pushes, but it was still going to be up to the people to decide. One thing was for sure though, they wouldn't be caught coming back to Britain unawares this time. If things went pear-shaped again, they would just make Australia their home and coax as many of their friends to join them as they could. After lunch they were all travelling down to the new home. Hermione's porte-clés necklace had an extra destination placed on it for easier commuting. She didn't bother asking how the goblins knew the location, she just correctly assumed that Harry was having top-of-the-range wards installed there as well. The owner of the building firm had promised to be on site to meet with them. When Harry mentioned he had a proposition for him, the man appeared very eager to be there. He and Hermione figured it would be easier to have the same contractors build an exact copy of the house they'd just finished, only difference would be the location. They would have to be leaving soon to keep their appointment. Mum had been on a high since the courtroom. The pictures in the brochures increased her excitement, and they were now going to visit their new Devon home. Probably just as well she didn't have any wine with lunch, as she was already high enough. Harry had misread the situation though. Visiting her new home and planning on where to build their next one was very exciting for Emma, but it didn't even come close to what happened in the courtroom this morning. Today Emma Granger got the son she'd always wanted, just not in a manner she could have envisaged. Chapter 71, ch.67. The park was massive and there must have been thousands of people all milling about, yet everything ran so smoothly. She reckoned this one park must employ as many people as the entire Ministry of Magic, which really imprinted on the young witch. That and the vending machines that gave you ice-cold drinks and snacks at the press of a button. She wondered if there was a house elf inside them. The twins loved the rides, but it was the shops that really caught their attention. Their dream was to one day open one of their own, and these were like nothing they had seen in the magical world. So bright and colorful, with an incredibly wide range of merchandise, both were drawn in like moths to a flame. Even the way the stuff was presented to the customers was worthy of note. Placing their own logo on goods not only provided free advertising but allowed them to increase the price as well. Charity would be pleased to know the twins were taking such an educational view of the outing. Charity was currently living off her nerves. She'd placed her faith in the children and could now only hope they appeared for lunch. Her faith was rewarded though as they began to filter into the enclosed part of the restaurant that the Grangers had hired. She couldn't fail to notice the two prefects, especially since Miss Clearwater had a grinning Mr. Wood on one arm and a large stuffed toy animal under her other. Apparently the groups of friends had been crisscrossing each other all over the park, swapping stories and rating attractions as they made their way to the next ride on their agenda. All the tension left the Muggle Studies professor as the last group entered their area, and they all sat down to lunch, watching as the Muggleborns explained what pizza and nachos were justified the entire trip as far as she was concerned. Emma was awash with conflicting emotions as she watched her daughter interact with her friends for the first time. On the one hand, she couldn't be happier to see this version of Hermione live such a different life. Outwardly at least she appeared a radiantly happy young girl. Hearing from Dan last night what they'd done to the Weasley lad had her in tears, not for Percy but the fact her children had to take actions like this. Like almost everyone, Emma had never taken someone's life, and the old Emma would have argued it was something she was incapable of. That was before hearing what happened to her daughter at the hands of the youngest Weasley boy. In their timeline it was less than 3 weeks since they lay helpless as Hermione was abducted from their living room. Listening on the phone as both Hermione and Harry were basically sentenced to death had changed Emma Granger forever. This Emma Granger was not in a forgiving frame of mind and would kill to protect her loved ones. She just wished there was some way they could take the burden from Harry and Hermione. Once again they were relegated to playing the role of support troops. Both Grangers found themselves concentrating on the lives their children were determined to save, rather than those fated to meet their end by Harry and Hermione's hand. They now knew Sirius, Remus, Charity, Nymphadora, and Ted Tonks. Even some of the kids here today would hopefully change their ways. She glanced at the twins chatting with Ginny and tried to remember which one of them had originally died, not that it mattered since she couldn't tell them apart anyway. Her children had now killed 2 people and planned for another 3, 4 if you counted Voldemort. Strangely, Emma found herself accepting that, if the youngest male Weasley had been here today, she doubted if she could have prevented Dan murdering him. Emma probably would have helped. It wasn't too difficult for Sirius to guess where Emma's thoughts were taking her. The 3 had spent a lot of time talking about the 2 most important people in the world to them. Sirius had tried to give the Grangers some insight into the pureblood opinions and their way of thinking. Just because he didn't agree with them didn't mean Sirius couldn't understand them or where they were coming from. He would have to try to explain to Dan and Emma exactly how big a coup the kids had pulled off here. Sirius was vilified and eventually disowned after being sorted into Gryffindor. Rejecting the Dark Lord's philosophies was the final straw for a family who were actually darker than their name. Here were children of all blood classifications and the 4 houses of Hogwarts sitting together as friends in a Muggle establishment. This was groundbreaking, this was momentous, this was so much fun. Purebloods wearing t-shirts and baseball caps with a Muggle theme park logo on them was a prank worthy of the heir to the Marauders. Harry and Hermione had begun something here today that could literally change the British magical community. It was only a small first step, but didn't all journeys start that way? Chapter 72, ch.80. Charlie was getting short on time. He still had to visit Muriel and collect Mum's clock. Ginny though was insisting that he visit the site of their old home. Charlie was reluctant, but it would make his sister happy and mean less time to spend with Muriel. How could he say no to that? Emma's day was getting better and better. Their new home was all they had dreamed and designed. The real clincher though was being told they could move in at the end of the month. Realism then hit Emma with a vengeance. That was next week and they'd never be ready. Hermione could see where her mother's mind was racing. Mum, don't panic. You have 3 people who can perform magic staying in the house. We can shrink everything into a couple of trunks before driving down here and expanding it again. Harry then revealed some of his secret dealings with the goblins by handing Emma a credit card in her name. This is to buy anything you need for the house. Please also use it to book the flights once we've settled on a destination. This earned Harry a massive hug from his new mum and you'll be explaining that later, a look from his wife. Both left him feeling very happy. The contractor meanwhile had been having a quick word with his workers. All were very keen to head off to Australia and build their second Potter home. When he considered the prestige, the profit, and missing a month of the British winter to enjoy Australian sunshine, there really was no decision to make. They would all be spending the month of October in Australia. Harry and Hermione heard the voices of their friends calling on them. Turning, they immediately spotted Luna and Ginny running toward them. That they were accompanied by Charlie caused Hermione to draw her wand. She didn't expect to need it, but appearances had to be maintained. Charlie's mixed feelings about seeing his old home disappeared the instant he laid eyes on the site. The area before him bore as much relation to the burrow as a Komodo dragon did to a Hungarian horntail. It wasn't just the beautiful house either, the entire landscape had changed beyond recognition. As he watched his sister and Luna race to greet their friends, he was rather surprised to see the girl draw her wand and hold it at her side the instant she caught sight of him. He was not surprised that she then tracked his every movement. Charlie was positive that if his behavior was in any way threatening, this girl would be firing curses first and asking questions later. Charlie said hello to the Grangers and was introduced to Sirius Black before he felt compelled to say something about the situation. "Excuse me, miss, I mean you no harm. There really is no need for you to have your wand in hand." Hermione's response was not what Charlie expected. "I'm not a miss but Lady Hermione Potter. You claim to mean us no harm, but experience has taught me that, until I get to know them, then no one can be trusted." "That's a pretty grim view of life you have there, Lady Potter." Hermione came right back at him. "When you're sitting in school eating breakfast and your husband gets attacked by a madwoman, there really isn't a lot of options left open to you." Charlie had no answer to that. especially when Ginny threw in her 2 nuts worth. Mum would have gone for a repeat performance in the leaky cauldron if Dad hadn't silenced and put a full body bind on her. Sorry Charlie, but Hermione is right to be careful. I know you would never do anything like that, but they don't. Fred and George got the same treatment until they were found to be trustworthy. This actually drew a semblance of a smile from Charlie. I'm not sure whether to be more upset that Lady Potter doesn't trust me or that she trusts the twins more. I don't think I've ever been so insulted in my life. This broke the ice between him and the Potters, though Hermione still didn't put her wand away. Appearances had to be maintained. If you don't mind, the twins are friends of ours. I've never met a sensitive Weasley before, far less one who's a dragon handler. Ginny couldn't help but burst out laughing at Hermione's quip. The idea of Charlie being sensitive was just too funny. Harry was smiling too as he spoke to their friends. Girls, we hope to be moved in here by next weekend. You know our door is always open to you. Hermione now has a porte-clés that will bring us directly here, so we'll meet you at this house on Saturday. Luna had to ask, what are you guys doing here? Shouldn't you be at Hogwarts today? Hermione actually blushed at the explanation. Even though she was really 19, missing school was not something to do lightly. We had court this morning and bunked off school for the rest of the day. We just had to see how the house was progressing. Charlie was surprised but delighted at how well the 4 youngsters got on together. Hearing Ginny talk about her friends was one thing, seeing them interact was totally different. The young girl may have introduced herself as Lady Potter, yet there were no airs or graces between the 3 girls. Charlie understood the lady bit was a defense mechanism against being treated like a child. Ginny had told him the girl was very smart and extremely powerful. The dragon handler was beginning to come down on the side of the Potters. Ginny was happier than he'd seen her, and the twins were singing their praises too. Ron was the lone voice of discontent. If Dad and Bill had no trouble with the young couple, who was Charlie to rock the boat? Chapter 73, ch.68. Hermione had asked that there not be another birthday cake or large fuss. Like Harry, she hated being the center of attention and already had her fill this week. Being here with Harry, her parents, and her friends was more than enough for the once lonely girl. They'd saved her favorite ride until after lunch, not wanting to spend the day wearing wet clothes. Her husband could easily perform a wandless drying charm on them, though that was something they had no intention of advertising. Charity was a lot calmer as she watched the children head back into the park. She was actually looking forward to going on some more rides herself. There was still a few hours before the park began to close, and she intended to make the most of them. Tracy Davis had been physically flung about, turned upside down on more than one occasion, and nearly been sick 3 times. She'd just had one of the best days of her life. Heading back onto the bus, she began to contemplate the letter she was going to be sending home. Her father had asked Tracy to forward her impressions of the day as soon as possible. She was aware her father was disturbed by the casual way Harry had dismissed the life debt. He actually planned on speaking to him about it when their proposed visit to the ministry was arranged. He was thinking like a pureblood and considering what it would have cost him if someone like Draco Malfoy had saved her instead. Tracy was certain that Harry not only knew exactly what he'd done but actually thought her calling him Harry was a fair payment. Theirs was a whole different way of thinking, and the Slytherin girl was beginning to understand why. She had seen and experienced some wondrous things today. Yes, most of them could be replicated using magic, but that wasn't the point. Tracy had been raised to think she was better than these people, yet their ingenuity and inventiveness, not to mention their organizational skills, were mind-blowing. What they achieved without magic was truly awe-inspiring, leaving Tracy thinking that perhaps instead of better, different would be a more apt description. With that thought, Harry and Hermione's hopes for the day were accomplished, for now. As the occupants on the coach were enjoying their fish suppers while en route to the leaky cauldron, a very nervous Ron Weasley made his way toward the staff table as dinner ended. It was the head of Gryffindor. He approached. "Excuse me, Professor McGonagall, but do you know where Percy is? I've been looking for him all day. He's missed breakfast, lunch, and now dinner." McGonagall's eyebrows shot up. She couldn't remember seeing Percy today either. Minerva called for Sir Nicholas, who rapidly organized a search of the castle. Turning her attention back to Ronald, she tried to offer the lad some encouragement. With the ghosts, house elves, and portraits all looking for him, your brother should soon be found. McGonagall's reassurances proved to be hollow though, as neither hide nor hair had been seen of Percy Weasley since his last class yesterday. All that they could surmise at the moment was that the lad didn't appear to be in the castle. Whether he'd used today's outing as a cover to sneak out was something they were forced to wait on their returnees for more information. It was a group of very happy, though extremely tired students who returned to Hogwarts. They were originally disconcerted to find there was a reception committee waiting on them. Charity and Remus quickly confirmed that, not only was Percy not with them but they hadn't seen him at any point when leaving the castle. The twins also reported that they hadn't seen their brother since yesterday, all thoughts of joking pushed aside as they could see this was serious. Oliver had to confess that he didn't see Percy in the dorm last night. McGonagall fixed him with a withering stare that demanded an explanation. Professor, since being made prefect, Percy has continually refused to recognize my authority. He has worked behind the scenes to usurp me and won't be satisfied until he gets this badge back. When he didn't show before I went to bed last night, I assumed this was an attempt to disrupt today's outing. His jealousy over the badge dims in comparison to his rage over my association with Miss Clearwater. Since she has most graciously agreed to be my girlfriend, I fully expected I would need my wand to defend myself when he discovered the news. McGonagall was unhappy, though forced to concede she'd placed Wood into this situation. If he'd went to bed before curfew, then the prefect had done no wrong, he'd ensured the younger students had been accounted for, so had done his job. This was the reason they had an earlier curfew. The school has been searched from top to bottom with no sign of him being found. I'm going to have to inform the DMLE and his guardian that he's missing. Her intimidating stare aligned onto new targets as she spoke to the Weasley twins. Is there anything that you can tell me about this? Something that might seem unimportant yet provide the clue that we need. George gave it a moment's thought before answering. Percy didn't want to return to Hogwarts. He's actually called us a disgrace to our family for associating with the Potters. When he discovered Ginny was staying with them this weekend, I thought he was going to explode. McGonagall's eyebrows were once more heading into her hairline at the news Ginny Weasley was spending time with the Potters. Fred agreed with his twin. He took losing the badge very badly and has been giving Oliver a hard time. We also think he might have secretly fancied Penelope but didn't do anything about it. He seemed to think of something and then dismissed the idea. It's a pity that Mum's clock isn't working properly, or it may have been some help. McGonagall had heard of this timepiece and asked what the problem was. Ever since we got back from King's Cross, all the hands were pointing at mortal peril. Dad made her take it down and placed it in storage. It was frightening Ginny and Ron, and there was no spare cash to get it repaired. Something in his brother's words caused a spark of an idea to go off inside Fred's head. Moony, Harry has something that could really help us out here. Do you think he would let us borrow it? Remus could have kicked himself for not thinking of it sooner. He supposed that's what happens when your thoughts turn to a beautiful smile, sexy laugh, and spiky pink hair. They would have to drive back from London, so should still be up. I'll leave immediately and try not to alarm Ginny too much. Albus had been allowing Minerva to deal with the situation until hearing Harry's name mentioned. And just what, may I ask, has Mr. Potter got to do with this situation? Fred and George glanced at one another quickly before answering. Nothing, sir. He has in his possession something he received from his father that will determine if Percy is actually in the castle. Albus liked the sound of that. The minute Remus returned with the item, he would be confiscating it. Something like that shouldn't be in the hands of a student, rather in the more experienced care of a certain headmaster. Chapter 74, ch.81. Charlie's visit to his aunt's was short but certainly not sweet. That woman would still be sour if she was buried up to her armpits in sugar. He hated to think of Ginny staying with this vile woman. She wouldn't be the happy, vivacious young girl he saw today if she lived under this roof. Charlie was forced to listen as this septic old spinster denounced and degraded every single member of the Weasley clan. By the time her rant had reached Ginny, he'd had more than enough. Charlie dealt with real dragons daily. As poisonous as Muriel was, she's a pale imitation to the real thing. The anger in his voice was unmistakable as he gave the bitch a taste of her own medicine. My sister is far better off where she is. Not only does she have friends and people who care for her, she doesn't have to endure your grating voice proclaiming how worthless she is at least 400 times a day. I have a younger brother who's missing and all of your concern is focused on a perceived slight upon your person. I shall be writing to my parents tonight and recommending they change the name on the Hogwarts contact list to me. I can get to Scotland reasonably easily and I can't imagine any of my family approaching you for help. Muriel was beyond angry and 3 streets past furious. These ungrateful Weasleys had no sense of gratitude whatsoever. With speed that belied her age, she drew her wand and blasted Molly's clock to smithereens. Take your trash and yourself out of my home, neither you nor any of your tribe will ever cross my doorway again. Charlie was well aware that was his mother's prized possession this vindictive old bitch had just destroyed. There was also no doubt Muriel understood exactly what she was doing. Listen, you vindictive old bat, if I have anything to do with it, no Weasley will ever set foot in this house again. My father must have been desperate to even consider this as an option. Personally, I would rather stay in Azkaban than here. I'll bet Dementors would have no effect on you, there would be no happy memories for them to feed on. Hell, they would probably recognize a kindred spirit. Like them, you can suck all the happiness out a room just by entering. I'll bid you goodbye and never intend to set eyes on you again. Charlie stormed out, leaving a speechless Muriel behind. He was trying to figure out what to do now that his mother's clock was destroyed. He had a glimmer of an idea but would have to move fast if he intended to pull it off. Next morning an owl delivered a thick envelope to the Weasleys in Cairo. It was with shaking hands that Arthur opened it. He pulled out Percy's journal, 5 small packets and a goblin bank draft. It was the enclosed letter from Charlie that the 3 were really waiting on. Arthur read it out loud to save the other 2 from waiting to read it. Mum, Dad and Bill. I spoke to the Ministry and Minerva, all are of the opinion that Percy has run away and currently laying low. I have enclosed his diary which gives a very good insight into what he was feeling at the time. Also spoke with the twins and they confirmed that while Percy was apparently sweet on this girl, he'd never actually spoken to her other than normal class time. While the Aurors are actively searching for him, it's not being treated as a high priority as they fully expect him to turn up soon. They will contact me immediately they hear anything. Twins are very well, although Ron appears to have some trouble settling at Hogwarts. Apart from the strangeness of seeing a Weasley wearing the green, there's also the matter of him being friendly with the Malfoy boy. Both have managed to alienate themselves from the rest of the school due to their continual bad-mouthing of the Potters. Ginny on the other hand is happier than I've seen her and getting along brilliantly not only with Luna but her new neighbors the Potters. I dread to think what she would have turned out like had she been left in the care of that vicious bitch Muriel. I have to apologize, Mum. Muriel was bad-mouthing our family something fierce when I had enough and blew my top. The reason I need to apologize is the bitch destroyed your clock in a childish fit of temper. I know you need a hair from each of us for a clock to work, so I raced back to Hogwarts to collect 3 hairs, followed by a trip to see Ginny, and then one of my own should cover most of us. I also included a Gringotts draft for as much as I could afford. The twins and Ginny also contributed. They spent last weekend with the Potters at some Muggle attraction and Harry refused to take back the Muggle spending money he gave them. The goblins converted it to galleons and added it to the draft. I hope it's enough to help with a new family clock. I also want you to write to Minerva. I don't want Muriel to have anything more to do with our family and I will happily travel back from Romania rather than have her poking her nose in. We'll write again soon and contact you the moment I hear any other news from Britain. Hang in there, Mum, you know he'll turn up. Charlie. Molly was crying as she held Percy's journal. Bill picked up the Gringotts draft. He agreed wholeheartedly with Charlie that Ginny was better off anywhere other than Muriel's and was mightily relieved to hear his opinion on the Percy situation. Mum, if we add a bit to this I should be able to get you a clock made before the end of the week. She was quietly sobbing as she began reading her missing son's diary. By way of an answer she just pulled out one of her hairs and passed it to her eldest. Arthur removed one of his own from a rapidly declining source. Keep that safe, the way things have been going lately I'll soon have none left. Bill tugged one from his own head and promised to see about a new clock for his mum today. Chapter 75, ch.69. Remus caught them having a cup of tea before bed. After explaining the situation, the Marauder's map was quickly spread on the kitchen table. When Harry activated the parchment, Remus demonstrated how to use the map's search function, something Harry hadn't learned about the last time. When the search for Percy produced no results, Sirius suggested trying someone else to confirm the map was still functioning properly. It took less than a minute to pinpoint Argus Filch as he patrolled the corridors, proving the map was working and Percy wasn't in the castle. "Do you think he's run away?" Ginny quietly asked. Remus answered the girl as honestly as he could. "Ginny, at the moment all we know is Percy's not in the castle, no one has seen or heard anything. The twins said he didn't want to return to Hogwarts and had been acting strangely lately. Percy doing a runner is the only explanation we have for now. I knew he didn't want to go back because of that bloody batch. I can't believe he'd do something this stupid." Luna was hugging her best friend in support. Hermione was very grateful for Harry's arm around her waist. Only his strength and support kept her from breaking down. "Oh." The three Weasleys, Dumbledore, and McGonagall were all awaiting his return, but it was to the twins he addressed his comments. "Sorry guys, Percy isn't in the castle." Minerva gave a tired sigh before heading toward the fireplace to flick all the DMLE. She would then have to deal with Muriel Pruitt, not a task to be undertaken lightly. The Weasleys left for their respective dorms as Albus made his move. "Remus, if there exists a method for keeping track of people inside Hogwarts, then I must have it. I am the headmaster after all." Remus couldn't believe the cheek of the old man. "I'm afraid you will find that it belongs to Harry. It's one of the few items he possesses that connects him to his father. I wish you luck in the task of trying to force him to surrender it. There is more chance of the goblins giving away free gold than Harry parting with a Potter family heirloom." Dumbledore was getting pretty fed up of people saying no to him. This never used to happen. He was about to remind Lupin that he actually was employed by Hogwarts, therefore Albus Dumbledore, when Minerva returned from her flu calls. "We will have Aurors at the school before breakfast. Hagrid is sweeping through the Forbidden Forest as we speak, looking for traces of the boy. I have to inform you, Albus, that Muriel Pruitt will also be here for breakfast. I got the impression that your entrails might be on her menu. She was very upset at getting dragged into the Pettigrew incident and is demanding to speak with you personally when she arrives tomorrow." Minerva would have smiled at the headmaster's facial expression if the situation hadn't been so serious. There had been instances in the past where children had gone missing for a short time, though they had always turned up within a day or two. Minerva couldn't get rid of the feeling that this time it was going to be different. Harry was lying in bed with his wife wrapped in his arms, running his fingers through her hair as he tried to comfort a crying Hermione. "Oh Harry, I just keep seeing that expression of worry on Ginny's face. I don't know if I can do this again, love." "Hermione, we'll give him the same chance he gave you. He'll be in a bathroom when our rather large and smelly visitor comes trick-or-treating to Hogwarts. Let's see if any of his Slytherin friends come running to his rescue." Hermione stopped crying for a moment. "You mean it, Harry? You would do that for me?" Harry held her tighter. "Hermione, you are the most important person in my life. Your happiness is everything to me. Percy never had a chance, but I'm prepared to let fate play a part in deciding if Ron should have one." Harry was a little disturbed at the passionate kiss this earned him. Hermione then spoke softly in his ear. "It's not that I don't want him to pay, I just don't think I would be able to face Ginny afterwards if we did the same to two of her brothers. Perhaps we should concentrate our efforts on getting rid of Riddle first." Harry kissed her forehead. "Love, I've had some ideas about that. We could contact the goblins about buying the old Riddle place, that would save that caretaker's life as well. Purchase the Gaunt shack that's next to it and the goblins can rip it apart, disposing of the ring without us having to go anywhere near it. I was thinking of building a garden center on the site, something really muggle to piss Tom off if he ever makes it back." The thought of Lord Voldemort travelling to Little Hangleton in search of his Horcrux and leaving with a couple of hostess almost brought a smile to Hermione's face. If we get the Ravenclaw diadem next week, then that would only leave the diary. Dumbledore was almost positive Nagini wasn't made into a Horcrux until Riddle got his new body in the cemetery. Something we have no intention of allowing to happen this time. Hermione snuggled in deeper. Smart and considerate. How did I ever get so lucky as to marry you? I'm the lucky one, love. He kissed his wife goodnight and held her until she'd calmed enough to sleep. Harry understood she was upset and not thinking rationally here, being confronted with the aftermath of Percy and then having to spend the weekend with Ginny immediately after had thrown her for a loop. Hermione was unshakable in her belief that the Dursleys should be made to pay for the treatment of her husband. Yet in the same breath wanted Ronald Weasley to have a chance. Harry had no intention of letting the redhead avoid his date with the troll. This Harry Potter wasn't going to be anybody's golden boy, rather take out the problems before they affected his family. For those that harmed his Hermione there would be no escape and no remorse on his part. Making sure the target was in the toilet should be fairly easy, the rest was simply ensuring his date didn't stand him up. Dousing Ronald in troll pheromones should ensure the big guy arrived, though with a club in his hand instead of flowers. Harry thought that Ronald being rogered to death by a Randy Rank troll was a fitting punishment for the animal who dared to touch his Hermione. Muriel Pruitt travelled down into her cellar and rummaged amongst the assembled junk that Arthur had stored there, looking until she found the famous Weasley clock. It only required a glance to discover it was obviously still not working properly. The hands for Fred and George were correctly pointing at school, but Ginny's strangely indicated the child was at home. Charlie, Bill, and Arthur were each pointing toward work, though the hands representing Molly and Ronald were still stuck at mortal peril. The hand that represented Percy appeared to have been knocked off, probably when they stored it down here. Molly's precious clock was every bit as worthless as the rest of the Weasleys' junk. Muriel would have her talk with Dumbledore before sending an owl to Arthur. She headed off to bed, smiling in anticipation of her upcoming confrontation with Dumbledore and the pleasure obtained from ripping him a new one. It would so start her week off in the right vein. Chapter 76, ch.82. Narcissa Malfoy almost choked on her breakfast as she read the letter that had been delivered by an unknown owl. Lucius couldn't help but notice his normally cultivated and cultured wife spraying coffee over the table. He inquired who the letter was from. It's from the head of the Black family. He's citing you belonging to an organization that murdered his brother as breaking the contract of our marriage. Death Eaters killing the heir to the House of Black is more than enough legal justification for this to be quickly passed. It was now Lucius's turn to do a spit take at the breakfast table. What? He can't do that. I was under the Imperious curse, everyone knows that. Narcissa hated pointing out the obvious, a task that she supposed she should be used to by now with the Malfoy males. It would appear neither Sirius Black nor the goblins believe that claim. The fact that you never stood trial under Veritaserum doesn't help your case either. He's already dissolved Bella's marriage and then banished her from the Black family. He's only writing to me in the hope I don't have the dark mark. He's given me 2 days to meet him and prove this is not the case, otherwise I will suffer the same fate. The goblins have also been instructed that, since you broke the contract, the Black family is reclaiming my dowry, plus interest. Lucius was feeling sick. It was bad enough they were becoming social pariahs, but this on top would finish them for good. His wife would have no name, he would have no money, and their son would be a bastard. Lucius had to take action and fast. This situation could not be allowed to happen. Write to him at once and arrange a meeting. I'm sure we can come to some sort of agreement. Lucius had his hand on the ever-present cane with the snake motif. Yes, they would soon reach an agreement. Narcissa knew her husband well enough to guess what was going through his mind. He's not stupid. Sirius will be in a private room at Gringotts between 1 and 2 o'clock today and tomorrow. How bad would this be for us financially? Lucius was so far into shock he couldn't even lie to his wife. Disastrous would not be too strong a word. We would have to sell anything we could and flee the country. There would be nothing left for us here. The rest of Narcissa's breakfast was forgotten about. she'd become accustomed to this way of life and didn't want to see it go. Lording over some peasants in a god-forsaken backwater was not her idea of a pleasant future. Then I suppose I'll have to meet him and beg for mercy. Lucius wore a truly evil grin. No, my dear, I will. By the end of the week Draco could be the new Lord Black and all our financial worries will be over. Sirius is going to discover just what it means to cross a Malfoy. A Slytherin will always outsmart a Gryffindor. Narcissa hoped her husband was correct. She really didn't want to be starting over with a lot less than she had now. She always thought the dark mark on her beautiful alabaster skin was a massive mistake. If Sirius laid eyes on it she'd neither be a Malfoy or a Black. Narcissa couldn't abide the shame of being a penniless, nameless single mother with a bastard son. She would have to place her faith in her husband and pray he could handle Sirius. In Little Whining a similar scene was being played out at number 4 Privet Drive, but for an entirely different reason. Vernon was wiping off the fruit juice his wife had just spat all over him. His growl demanded an explanation from the clearly excited woman. Vernon, you won't believe this, but after spending all those years entering my stupid competitions, we finally hit the jackpot. I've just won an all-expenses paid around-the-world cruise for 2. Vernon stared at his wife, awaiting the punchline of this very bad taste joke. Instead she handed him the letter to read for himself. The walrus started to become as excited as his wife as everything looked to be the genuine article, an all-inclusive 5-star cruise around the world. Spending the coming winter cruising sunnier climes for free was certainly appealing. In his mind Vernon was already picturing the both of them on the deck of the cruise liner. He would have to take unpaid leave as his holidays wouldn't stretch to this. Dudley would have to either spend Christmas at Smeltings or with Marge. He intended to investigate this strenuously before saying a word to anyone. When it proved to be genuine, then Vernon would soon ensure that everyone heard that he and his wife would be cruising around the world. Petunia was daydreaming of finally being able to mix with the kind of people she was supposed to be amongst. Her bridge club would be green with envy when they heard of her good fortune. Like her husband, Petunia would ensure they heard about it. Oh, how they would hear about it. Jessie Wallace managed to mention her trip to Rome at least every third sentence she spoke. Petunia would be dining at the captain's table while visiting exotic places like Cape Town, Hong Kong, and Singapore. She wouldn't have to keep mentioning the Rome Colosseum. Petunia would have enough memories and stories never to have to repeat herself for years. She was going to have to acquire a new wardrobe though. Meeting a better class of people would require the clothes to match. Vernon's credit cards would soon take care of that. Shopping followed by a luxury cruise. Could it get any better? Chapter 77, ch.70. Muriel had risen bright and early on Sunday morning, bursting with anticipation of the upcoming confrontation. She hadn't anticipated experiencing a confrontation before she set foot in the castle. It makes no difference if you told the headmaster you were coming today or not. Until I receive confirmation back from him, then I can't allow you access to the castle. Muriel was not about to be thwarted by a mere security guard. If you were doing your job properly, then I wouldn't need to be here. Where was this wonderful security when my nephew went missing yesterday? Her smug expression was soon wiped off her face by a voice coming from behind her. That wonderful security was foregoing his day off to accompany a bunch of students on a school trip. I believe 2 of your nephews and niece were also involved. Muriel spun round to face this new threat. The fact that it had bright pink hair was enough to set her off. Totally ignoring the aura robes or the 5 other auras with her, Muriel cut loose. I can assure you none of my relations were on any school trip. They would have needed my permission, which would most certainly not have been forthcoming. My niece doesn't even attend this school. It would appear they are letting absolutely anyone wear aura robes these days. Remus found himself liking this harpy even less after the way she spoke to Tonks. He understood immediately that the twins must have forged this woman's signature and couldn't blame them in the slightest. To divert her attention away from that fact, he concentrated on Ginny's presence at the theme park. Ginny was present as a guest of Lord and Lady Potter. She and her friend Luna have been spending the weekend with them. Miss Tonks was there as a ministry aura to assist with security. I can assure you we both take our jobs and responsibilities very seriously. Your nephew did not leave the castle while I was in charge of security. The headmaster's answer should arrive any minute, until then you are not allowed access. Just to upset Muriel more, the 6 Aurors passed straight through. Tonks rubbed some salt in the festering wound by shouting back, "Remember, I'll see you Wednesday for the lessons, Remus. I'll clear it with McGonagall so I'm allowed entry." She walked away laughing with the other Aurors, leaving behind a furious Muriel and a werewolf who just had his day considerably brightened. Draco Malfoy could be considered part seer, as he'd made a far more accurate prediction than the resident professor of divination ever did. Breakfast that morning was full of still hyper students telling anyone who would listen just how great their Saturday had been. Logo-covered baseball hats, t-shirts, furry stuffed toys and a multitude of Muggle photographs, automatically taken of the students on various rides, added an unusual yet welcome touch of spice to breakfast in the castle. McGonagall was delighted the day had been such a success. At the staff table, Charity was also laughingly showing her photograph of being strapped in next to Sirius Black and apparently screaming her head off. Knowing that rogue Sirius as she did, Minerva thought that was a perfectly understandable reaction. She was glad these students didn't have any lessons today, they would hopefully have calmed before classes tomorrow. McGonagall thought their reaction, or lack of one, to Percy Weasley's disappearance was also perfectly understandable. The boy hadn't been well liked without any close friends. The fact that it took his brother the entire day to notice he was missing told its own story. That family's run of bad luck was becoming ridiculous, it almost seemed as if someone had it in for the Weasleys. Minerva would have been deeply troubled to discover just how true that thought was. Minerva also hoped the planned ministry trip would amount to more than a walk around the building before listening to fudge talk. After yesterday's outstanding success, the ministry now had the students' high expectations to live up to. They'd all seen what the Muggle world had to offer and been very impressed. The ministry better get its act together because the children would inevitably judge one against the other. It wouldn't do for the magical world to be found wanting. Several parents were sitting down to breakfast while reading the latest letters from their children, glowing with praise of the Muggle world and sharing the same thoughts as Minerva. Chapter 78, ch.83. Neville was delighted to see the smiles displayed on the faces of his friends on their return to Hogwarts. They lit up the Great Hall that morning. It was obvious they got the result they were looking for yesterday. Not that Neville was in any way surprised by this, he and everyone else were learning that the Potters usually got what they were after. Tonight they had an extra defense lesson from Remus Lupin and Auror Tonks. The upper years were so jealous. Everyone thought Snape and Quirrell were useless teachers, only Harry and Hermione had actually done something about it. As the couple sat down beside him, Neville couldn't help but think of the differences they'd made to his life. The Slytherin girl sitting on his other side was just one of them. Life just kept getting better for Neville Longbottom as his Hogwarts experience was outshining all his admittedly modest expectations. Tonks left the Grangers sporting blue hair. The Auror thought she was so clever springing this surprise on Sirius. He wasn't supposed to know what hit him. How was it then that she found herself standing here like a nervous schoolgirl, fretting over what she would have to do tonight? She had been looking forward to returning to Hogwarts tonight. After probing her feelings a bit deeper, Tonks was astonished to discover the reason why. As a metamorphmagus, she discovered quite early that she had to be honest with herself. It was a key fact in being able to control her transformation. She had to know herself and her emotional state, otherwise she could lose herself into the myriad of changes available to her. The revelation that she was looking forward to tonight because Remus was going to be there made what she had to ask him 100 times more awkward. It would have been bad enough to ask him on a date as a friend, but now to find out she may actually like him as more than a friend was startling. Tonks had no illusions of a brave knight on a white steed sweeping her off her feet. She was still surprised though to find that the kind, gentle, funny Remus Lupin had pierced her armor and managed to touch her heart. She would just have to play it cool and see where things led. It's not like this was her first crush on a teacher, she was an Auror for Merlin's sake. Remus also found himself going about his duties with a spring in his step, he though was under no illusions why that was. Just the prospect of spending some time in the company of the beautiful, funny, pink-haired girl was enough to brighten any day. Remus was enough of a realist to understand these feelings could never be returned. He wasn't bitter or ranting at the world in general for his lot in life, he was a werewolf and this was as good as it got. In actual fact his life was currently better than at any time since leaving Hogwarts as a student. He had a job, a place to live, his best friend back in his life, the son of his friends thought he was cool and he would be in the company of a beautiful woman tonight as they taught children how to defend themselves. Yes, Remus Lupin was better than he had been in many years. The feeling that fluttered deep within his chest every time he thought of Tonks would have to stay just that, deeply buried. That he could take it out on a lonely night and bask in its warmth was something beyond treasure to the marauder. Hermione was the first to notice the tension between Tonks and Remus. Even with that tension their lesson was still one of the best defense lessons given in all her years at Hogwarts. Remus had a sense of fun that was still complemented by Tonks, even though she seemed on edge about something tonight. McGonagall had provided a large classroom yet it was jam-packed with first-year students, everyone bar Draco and his crew. They were split into two groups. Remus was teaching them not to let any spell hit you and the basic shield charm for when you couldn't dodge. Tonks had her students practicing jellylegs jinxes and stinging hexes, emphasizing accuracy above all else. After each group had mastered their tasks, mock duels were quickly arranged to allow them to practice their newly acquired skills. The groups then swapped to learn offense/defense and complete the lesson. Remus advised them to practice as next time they would be having a dueling competition using only the spells they'd learned tonight. All the students were buzzing with excitement as they left the lesson, every single one of them thanked Remus and Tonks before filing out the room. Hermione was positive something was going on with the pair so dragged Harry away, leaving only their two teachers for the evening alone in the classroom. The marauder decided to get straight to the point. Tonks had been hardly able to look him in the eye all evening. "Are you going to tell me what's bothering you? Because if I'm supposed to know then I will have to admit to being clueless." Even with her metamorphic abilities, Tonks was unable to totally eliminate the blush that crept from her neck to her cheeks. "Oh Remus, you haven't done anything. I was trying to be clever and it's kinda backfired on me, well on us actually." Remus' eyebrows shot up as he tried to figure out just what the hell Tonks was talking about. She on the other hand knew she was going to have to tell him the full story. Tonks wasn't sure anymore how she got herself into this position in the first place. "I arranged a blind date for Sirius with one of my friends." Remus was instantly very attentive, judging by how nervous Tonks was and now adding Padfoot into the mix, this could be bad. Tonks continued, "Sirius maintains he's not ready to date yet and the only way I could get him to agree was by tagging along as a double date." Now Remus was confused. Sirius was born ready to date so that excuse was pure fiction. Also Tonks going along for a double date only made sense if she had someone as well. She couldn't mean him, could she? Tonks knew Remus was smart, the fact that she could see from his expression he'd worked it out only emphasized this point. "He suggested you as my date. He claims that with me and his best friend there, he would be able to relax and is less likely to make an arse of himself." The werewolf's mind was now racing. If this was a prank then it was a cruel one and Sirius wouldn't do that, not to him at least. Could he be so out of practice at hiding his feelings that Sirius had been able to read him so easily? He could see Tonks growing more and more nervous by the second. He had to act. "Miss Tonks, would you do me the honor of accompanying me on a date this Friday?" The relief on her face was clearly visible. Remus figured at worst he would have a very enjoyable evening. He couldn't let himself think that things might go well, those thoughts could lead to heartache. Not a good option for a werewolf. Chapter 79, ch.71. Amelia didn't need to read between the lines to discover Susan not only had a wonderful day but was very impressed with what she experienced. The head of the DMLE decided there and then that her department would run some combat simulations or practice duels that the kids could observe. She would also speak to some other departmental heads about putting on something a bit more exciting for the students. Yes, let the kids see the nuts and bolts of how the ministry worked, but they had to remember they were dealing with kids. With a wry grin, Amelia remembered asking Susan what part she liked best from her first ever visit of the ministry. Without any hesitation, the then 8-year-old replied, "The cafeteria, that cake we had was just brilliant." Amelia had made the classic mistake of forgetting her niece was a kid. To an 8-year-old, cake was way more important than a stuffy Wisengamot Chambers or Aurors in uniform. Brian Davis was also beginning to think he'd made a classic mistake in judging Lord Potter by traditional pureblood behavior. Reading Tracy's letter again, it would appear he really did want nothing more than his daughter's friendship as payment for a life debt. He would reserve final judgment until he'd met Lord Potter for himself. He was honor-bound to encourage Tracy to be friends with them now, but it really was a duty he would happily perform. Dumbledore's short letter from Remus made for much less pleasant reading. He was sorely tempted to deny the woman access to the castle. Albus racked his brains but couldn't come up with a decent enough reason for sending her home. With his position already precarious, he didn't think he could get away with dismissing her out of hand. He sent a note back granting access to the Dragon Lady. Deciding this was one meeting he was going to have in his office, he asked Minerva to escort Muriel there. Minerva was waiting at the front door for them. She invited Remus along in his role as security advisor. Knowing the temper Muriel had, he might be needed. She barged into Dumbledore's office in no mood for any preliminaries or verbal sparring. She wanted to get straight to the meat of the matter. "So, old man, employing one Death Eater while harboring another not enough of a balls up for you? You have to start losing students in your care now. Perhaps you'd care to explain how my nephew was misplaced, and why no one noticed until it was brought to your attention by his youngest brother." Albus was well aware the Weasley children were her grandnephews and nieces who she constantly and continually berated at every given opportunity. This manufactured display of affection from the hateful woman was fooling none of those present. Dumbledore was beginning to get seriously miffed at everything in the world being his fault. It was time to show this bitch who she was dealing with. "Miss Pruitt, it would appear your grandnephew has run away and is currently listed as missing, though for the life of me I can't think why he'd do something like that." The sarcasm and piercing look the last line was delivered with almost had Minerva and Remus sniggering, the Miss Barb hurting almost as much as the missing. "The castle and grounds have been thoroughly searched by Hogwarts staff, and this morning a group of Aurors are continuing the search. I'm afraid that at the moment all any of us can do is wait and see what their investigation uncovers." Muriel was about to explode. Wait and see was not good enough in her book. She wanted action. The fireworks were delayed though by the arrival of Tonks. "Headmaster, we found the boy's journal hidden in his trunk and think this will answer a few of the questions concerning his disappearance. Let me read some of it out to you. Got my prefect's badge today, phase 1 of my master plan completed. Now all I need is for some of those prefect rounds to be in the company of Penelope. She really should get to know me before I ask her to Hogsmeade. Have never been so humiliated in my life. McGonagall ruined my future in front of the entire school. I couldn't even bring myself to look in the direction of the Ravenclaw table. I could never hold my head up in Hogwarts again and definitely don't want to return there. Wood just left to go on patrol with Penelope. Can't write any more at the moment. Too angry to think straight." All eyes were now glued to Tonks as this tale unfolded. "The Potters just invited Wood and Penelope to London on Saturday. I cannot allow that to happen. My whole life is crashing down around my ears. I need to do something, but what? Almost did something really rash. Don't want them to get away with this, but require a well thought out plan. Need it fast though. Trip is tomorrow and I need to do something, getting desperate." They all thought this was Percy's gradual build-up to running away. Muriel now had another target to vent her vitriol on. "Who is this vixen Penelope that ensnared my nephew to the extent he would run away from his family?" Minerva came right back at her. "The girl in question doesn't even know your nephew exists and has done nothing to encourage this fantasy he seems to have built for himself. His own brothers confirmed he hadn't even spoken to the girl. This is no star-crossed lovers scenario, instead a rather unhealthy obsession on Percy's part that quite frankly gives me the creeps." Tonks butted in, not wanting to become embroiled in any pissing contest between these two formidable women. She wouldn't have minded a side bet on Minerva though. With no sign of abduction or foul play, we are now treating this as a simple runaway case. We shall continue searching the castle and grounds today, but don't expect to find anything else. With that she left. Remus grabbed the opportunity to accompany her out the door, and anywhere else she wanted to go. Albus was actually relieved. This was the first time in weeks something had went the way he wanted it to. He decided to end this as quickly as possible. Listening to Muriel Pruitt was not his ideal way of how to spend a pleasant Sunday morning. As you heard, the case now passes to the ministry. Can I ask if you will be contacting the boy's parents, or will that be left for us to do? Muriel was raging. This was not how she expected this to play out. She wanted blood on the carpet, preferably not her own. I am perfectly capable of informing them myself. Albus just nodded and sat there quietly. That she'd been so shoddily and easily dismissed certainly didn't improve her mood as she stormed from the castle in a rage. She would soon let Molly know what that idiot son of hers had cost Muriel Pruitt, lovesick young fool who was letting his hormones do his thinking. He better hope the Aurors found him first, because she would bloody castrate him. Chapter 80, ch.84. Hermione found herself being led by Harry. Not back to their quarters, but to a totally different part of the castle altogether. Harry, what are you up to? He deviously smiled at his young wife, knowing full well how much she hated not knowing something. We have to go and speak with someone, all will be explained then. Hermione of course wasn't happy with that answer, only the promise of an explanation soon headed off the impending storm. For the moment anyway. She was still no wiser when the couple found themselves outside the door of Professor Flitwick, and Harry was asking if they could speak with him for a moment. As they entered, Hermione marveled at the charms placed on the furniture. All the pieces except the professor's chair adjusted to the visitor's size. She wondered rather cheekily if their friend Hagrid ever visited. The little professor was as excitable as ever and almost bounced with glee at their presence. Well, this is a most unexpected but pleasant surprise. Does Professor McGonagall know you two are here? Both Potters really liked the head of Ravenclaw and were never fooled by his diminutive size. Here was a charms master and a warrior of some repute. You underestimated this man at your peril. No, sir. We will of course have to approach her on this matter, though I feel we may need your help with that. Phileas was now as intrigued as Hermione. Harry thought it would be cruel to tease his wife any more, so outlined his request. Auror Tonks let slip tonight that our visit to the Ministry of Magic would take place next Friday. It's an event we're all looking forward to, but I couldn't help thinking something was missing. Since discovering what it was that kept niggling at my brain, I've made a few inquiries that led me to your door, sir. I need your help with organizing an official Hogwarts visit to Gringotts. Phileas was very glad he was sitting in his own chair. Anything else and he would have slipped off onto the floor in shock. He'd paid careful attention as this couple had instigated a revolution in Hogwarts. The charms professor supported their efforts wholeheartedly. He felt though that they had just overreached themselves. Their lack of knowledge in the magical world betraying their eminently applaudable ambition. Hermione meanwhile wanted to grab her husband and kiss his socks off for even thinking of the idea. She wasn't sure if they could pull it off, but what a coup if they could. They had given their friends a small experience of Muggle life. If they could also open their eyes to the treatment of other sentient species, then anything was possible. Once bigotry was exposed to the harsh daylight and opened up for examination, it could no longer survive. Only through ignorance and darkness could it thrive. Her husband had apparently made it his mission to deny it both. She really couldn't wait to get him back to their room. Damn these young bodies that would deny her doing what she wanted to for a few years yet. Phileas tried to let the young couple down gently. Mr. and Mrs. Potter, I find myself extolling your intentions and goals. I fear I must be the bearer of bad news. The chances of the Goblin Council accepting such a proposal are non-existent. Harry's smile was wide and genuine. You misunderstood me, Professor. I don't need your help with the goblins. I already have their full agreement and support. It's selling this to the rest of the staff and the ministry we may need some help with. Phileas slowly rose to make them all a cup of tea. Normally he would have used his wand to accomplish this, he didn't feel he could trust his magic right at this moment. He also required the time this would take for the momentous news to penetrate his numbed mind. Hermione meanwhile had Harry wrapped in a hug while kissing his cheek. That would have to do for now. The professor's shaky voice came back to them from the little kitchen niche. If you don't mind me asking, what exactly have they agreed to? Harry was enjoying watching the tiny professor trying to play it cool. Hermione had clearly lost that battle as he reluctantly untangled himself from her arms. Well, sir, all the Muggleborn will get to open their own vault. The advantages of such will be explained before they do this. I will be covering the fees and placing an initial 10 galleons in each of them before we descend in the carts to see their new vaults. We will be shown some of the security measures that protect our investments and have been promised a peek at the famous Gringotts dragons. There will obviously be more, but those are the highlights. The sound of silence coming from their professor encouraged Harry to continue. What we would like from you is your help in convincing everyone what a wonderful opportunity this is. We could perhaps benefit from a lesson or two in goblin culture so we don't unknowingly start one of those goblin uprisings Professor Binns is so fond of droning on about. It took a feat of immense concentration to get both cups into the hands of these extraordinary young people without spilling the tea everywhere. The professor's hands were literally shaking from intense excitement. Mr. Potter, I'm not sure you understand the magnitude of what you have achieved here. I'm also more than slightly intrigued as to how you managed it. Chapter 81, ch.72. Hermione realized showing their friends around her home patch was a bad idea the moment she recognized some of the group walking toward them. Melissa, Shauna, and Abigail were her chief tormentors all the way through primary school, and of course they had a couple of clueless boys following them around in the hope one of the girls might actually speak to them. Hermione was having difficulty adjusting to the fact that it was only 3 weeks ago she left here to find a new life. It looked as if her old one was coming back to bite her on the arse. She wasn't in any way worried about her tormentors possessing the ability to hurt her, it was more Harry's reaction to them she was concerned about. He certainly wouldn't take too kindly if they started hurling abuse at his wife. Luna and Ginny's reactions were also unknowns. The couple's story of having been friends since primary school wouldn't stand up to too much examination. This lot saying they'd never seen him before certainly wouldn't help. Luna and Ginny's first weekend in the Muggle world was just about to become even more educational. Oh look, Granger's parents must have bought her some people to hang out with. Well, we all know they couldn't be her real friends. Yes, who'd want to be friends with that? The round of hollow laughter that followed the synchronized verbal assault was as phony as their hair color. Their routine though was slick and well honed through many years of diligent practice, they just didn't know this was a totally different Hermione Granger they were dealing with. Calmly Hermione answered her longtime tormentors, "Oh, you would be surprised, Melissa. Without bitches like you, Shauna and Abigail around, my life is actually quite pleasant now." This was too much for Steve. No one spoke back to Melissa. Here was his chance to show the girl of his more pleasant dreams just what he was made of. He pushed his way forward to confront Hermione before a cold voice caused him to hesitate. "I seriously wouldn't do that if I were you." Steve took one glance at the stature of the boy he was faced with and instantly dismissed Harry as any threat. "Why? What are you going to do about it?" he challenged. "Oh, nothing. I was just giving you a friendly word of warning. My Hermione is more than capable of taking care of herself." My Hermione bit through them for a second, and in that second the girl in question decided to act. Steve was standing with both feet planted and fists clenched, ready to hit Hermione for sullying the name of the beautiful and fair Melissa. Unfortunately for Steve, Hermione had no intention of fighting fair. In a takedown almost identical to the technique first used by Mrs. Potter on Ron Weasley, Steve found himself kissing the ground while his tackle sent messages of unbelievable pain to his brain and his nose colored the pavement red. Harry theatrically shook his head. Some people just never listen to good advice. Because someone makes the choice not to fight back doesn't mean they can't. As a lady, Hermione also reserves the right to change her mind at any point that suits her. They were clearly listening to him, though their eyes never left their fallen friend. Oh, and in case that demonstration wasn't enough and you need it explained further, any attacks on my Hermione will be met in the same manner. Swiftly and painfully, for you that is. Harry now stood shoulder to shoulder with his wife and both looked ready for trouble. Would anyone else like to say or do anything to my girlfriend? No? Well, if we're done here, then kindly take him with you and consider yourselves lucky. I wouldn't have been nearly as forgiving as Hermione. They walked away from the stunned group. Their original intention was to have a nice walk and then stop off for a burger. Hermione wasn't feeling hungry anymore, whether from the confrontation or the look of absolute hero worship in Ginny's eyes was debatable. Luna spoke to Harry. I'm beginning to understand your comment in the restaurant. It would seem neither of you has an easy childhood. Harry had his arm around Hermione's waist and realized he needed to answer this. Luna was a very smart girl who he didn't want to lie to. Hermione is a brilliant young lady. It's rather plain to see that crowd could easily be considered intellectually challenged. I had a very large cousin who beat up anyone who even spoke to me, far less tried to befriend me. You can possibly understand why Hermione and I weren't seen together in public too often. Now that I no longer live with my relatives, the need for hiding has passed and the gloves can come off. We won't stand for behavior like that from anyone. Harry knew this wasn't great, but making things up on such short notice to save their arses was Hermione's forte, not his. Both Luna and Ginny accepted it, though it was close enough to the truth about their childhoods to be believable. Chapter 82, ch.85. Harry couldn't help but notice Hermione was really looking forward to hearing this bit as well. Sir, my wife is Muggleborn. For all intents and purposes I might as well be too. As two strangers in this new world, there are things that make no sense whatsoever. The goblins are a prime example of this. As I mentioned earlier, all we know about them are the rebellions from history class. If that is all there is to know, then why in hell do we trust that nation with all our wealth? You would have to be completely nuts to give a so-called hostile foreign power complete and utter control of your country's wealth and economy. Why is there antagonism between goblins and wizards? This is a chance to see with our own eyes what goblins are all about, and hopefully dispel some of the nastier myths bandied about regarding them. Harry hadn't realized he'd climbed onto his soapbox, but the fire in Hermione's eyes made it worth the trip. To answer your question, Professor, I wrote to them and asked. When I explained that we would be seeing muggles and magical, yet felt the picture would be incomplete without highlighting their contribution to our world, I got an immediate yes in reply. Now it could be the effect of Harry Potter asking for something, but I got the impression they were delighted just to be asked. I was left thinking that doesn't happen too often in their dealings with wizards. Phileas was beyond shocked now. Could it be as simple as that? Yes, the Potter name would undoubtedly have helped, but would a request from Hogwarts have met with the same response? There were resources already at the fingertips of the school that had been ignored for decades. It took two newcomers to, not only point them out but seize the opportunities they presented. Phileas wondered if it was rather like the story of the Emperor's new clothes. If he remembered correctly, it was a child who pointed out that mistake as well. Perhaps they saw a different Albus to everyone else too. It would certainly explain their attitude toward him. Mr. Potter, you have my promise that I will do everything within my power to make this historic outing a reality. I think I can also guarantee that Professor McGonagall will also give it her full support. I fear all the opposition will come from the Ministry. Harry was again smiling. Sir, if we can keep this between ourselves and Professor McGonagall for now, I think we could possibly deal with the Ministry. Minister Fudge is sure to be there next week for our visit, and you just know he'll have all the press he can muster there as well. Wouldn't that be just the perfect time to say how much we enjoyed the Ministry visit and how it set the precedent for the one graciously offered by Gringotts the following week? Fudge will get his pictures and positive headlines, while the goblins will get some good publicity too for a change. Hermione so wanted to jump her husband right now, cursing this young body for the limits it imposed. She so loved it when he allowed his intelligent side out to play. There was so much more to this man than the boy who jumped on a troll's back to save her. She was the only one who got to see the real Harry Potter. Phileas Flitwick was head of the house where the supposedly intelligent students were placed and was a very hard professor to impress. Harry Potter had just blown him away. He had brilliantly circumvented the ministry and the headmaster to provide his year mates with an experience that had never been available before. The fact that he maintained his wife was the brains of the family was just downright scary. They chatted back and forth for ages until the professor realized the time. He quickly signed them a permission slip for being out past curfew and shooed them out the door. As the pair walked around the first corner, Hermione pounced on her man. What seemed like hours later, a known voice interrupted their kissing. They have their own room, why do they have to be doing this in a corridor after curfew? It was with a chuckle that Oliver answered, they're Gryffindor's Penny, it's the challenge that counts. Though I would hate to see my seeker get detention and miss Quidditch practice, I hope you pair have a good explanation. Hermione was blushing profusely, but Harry kept his arm around her waist as he handed his captain the acquired permission slip. In a sotto voice, Oliver asked his girlfriend a question, what do you think, Penny? It might even be genuine. Penny could only shake her head at her new boyfriend's question. Oliver, there is more chance of you giving up Quidditch for ballet than there is of you punishing someone on your team. Besides, I'm a Ravenclaw and recognize my head of house's signature. I think the Muggle phrase for these two is get a room, but, since they've already got one, I can only suggest they go there right now. Harry accepted both their slip and the advice in the spirit it was offered. He then led a still blushing Hermione back to their room. Harry couldn't be sure but thought he heard Oliver and Penny laughing as they continued on their rounds. Chapter 83, ch.73. Hermione was quiet as they made their way back home, heading directly for their room the moment she entered the house. Harry excused himself from the two girls and followed his wife up the stairs. As he entered the bedroom, she was standing with her back to him and facing out the window. Her voice was shaky as she spoke without turning around, Harry, I don't know who I am anymore. What I just did is so out of character that I don't know what came over me. Harry had his arms comfortingly around her as she leaned back, resting her head on his chest. Hermione love, I knew exactly what you were going to do today, remember I was there when you smacked Malfoy silly back in third year. You are the same Hermione who told Hagrid's giant brother off in sixth year. You my love are a formidable woman, unfortunately in the body of a 12-year-old girl. Harry could see that got her thinking, so decided to speak about a subject that they'd danced around for 3 weeks. Hermione, why didn't you tell me what that bastard had done to you that morning in Hogwarts? He felt her body immediately stiffen in his arms but continued to gently hold her, trying to express what he felt for her through his touch. Eventually she answered, Harry, I know exactly what you would have done and didn't want you to get into trouble. Hermione, it doesn't work like that. I love you and want to be there for you, that's one of the reasons why we're married. Even back then you were the most important person in my life. Would I have killed him? Unquestionably. Him and anyone else who tried to stop me. Would there have been repercussions? Again beyond a doubt, but I still would have done it. Instead we ended up dealing with it 6 months later and got murdered by the Ministry as way of thanks. Hermione's shaky voice indicated just how troubled she was. I understand where you're going with this, Harry. We should deal with our problems before they can become worse. I mostly agree with that, but there's a part of me screaming I don't have the right to make these decisions. I'm scared, Harry, I'm scared of losing who I am by acting this way. She attempted to offer up an explanation. The Ron we're planning to murder hasn't done anything to merit it yet. I look at the changes in Ginny and wonder if he doesn't deserve the same chance. Harry had moved her hair and was now gently kissing her neck in between, speaking softly to Hermione, Can I ask you something? Do you think me or Neville would ever have done that to you? Never, was her immediate and loud reply. Harry continued what he was doing, speaking softly to her. There's your answer, love. Ron came back for more and only me getting there in time stopped the bastard. Something like that has to come from within, as you so rightly said, Neville or me could never do it. Ron accepted that as a pureblood you were his plaything, not something you can change or I will ever allow to happen. He gently turned her around to face him. For us it's only been 3 weeks since he broke into this house and took you away. Anyone trying that now is in for a very nasty surprise courtesy of our goblin friends. Halloween is going to be brutal, why don't we head to Australia after it? Whether it's a holiday or something more permanent we can decide after we're there. He kissed away the tears that were running down her cheeks. I didn't come back in time to save the world, I came back for you. Hermione responded by kissing him back. Can we do that? What about everyone else? We can do anything we like, love. I have no intention of saving Britain if the cost is my wife suffering a breakdown. Let's do what we've got planned until Halloween and then leave. No one is more important to me than you. We've really only had that time in Australia with Mum and Dad to relax, and I now know you would have spent most of that berating yourself over what happened. She held him tighter, amazed at how well Harry knew her. If only we could get the diary away from Malfoy, then we wouldn't need to come back. I'm ready to take any chances that are offered. If the powers that be are listening, we could use a little help with this one. Hermione had a brainwave. Why don't we talk to Sirius about it? He'll be upset that we're handing the recovery of the ring over to the goblins. This would allow him to help, and you know there's no love lost between him and Lucius. You, my dear, are a genius. We can discuss it with the family on Tuesday. I vote we take the entire day off school and check the new house as well. I wonder if our builder has any contacts down under, or would fancy a little working vacation. Hermione wore a quizzical expression, so he gave her the answer she was looking for. We've already designed the perfect house for us, let's have one in Australia and one in Devon. I have no intention of forgetting our friends, so there will be a lot of visiting no matter what our final decision is. Hermione proceeded to administer their most passionate kiss to date. It was a dazed but very happy Harry who asked his most important question yet. What was that for? I'm only asking so I can be sure to do it again, with a reward scheme like that hopefully soon. That was for just being you, the person who knows me best in the whole wide world. I have been driving myself crazy, overthinking our choices and analyzing the arse out of everything. I will probably feel guilty about it afterward, but I do want him to pay. If we can get Lucius, so much the better. Him I won't feel anything but relieved that the bastard is finally gone. Molly has lost her home, any respect her family had for her, and, eventually, 2 of her sons. If she stays out of our way, I can live with that as a punishment. Chapter 84, ch.86. Ron had decided to make his big play at the Gryffindor table during breakfast. He reckoned that he couldn't lose. After getting those extra defense lessons last night, they would be dying to try them out. Just the phrase extra lesson was enough to ensure Ron didn't attend. He would just stroll up, make a few comments, act all insulted when they answered him back, and then issue the challenge to duel. What could go wrong? He made sure the twins were not there first. He didn't need word of this making its way back to Dad. Hey Potter, I've heard you've been hanging around with my sister. It stops now. She's far too good for the likes of you. Harry never even turned around to face the bastard. He didn't want to know if Crabbe and Goyle had accompanied him on this little adventure. Ron's date with Destiny was still a few weeks away. He couldn't afford a public confrontation that may see some awkward questions asked later. Fair enough. I'll tell her what you said when we see her on Saturday. Ron didn't know what to make of that, so decided just to press on regardless. So, you decided just to ignore my warning? That leaves only one way to settle this, Wizard's Duel. Midnight tonight in the trophy room, you may bring a second. Harry and Hermione shared a glance. Surely not again. If you think I'll be traipsing around the school corridors after curfew while you lie in bed and set filch on me, you must be thicker than I thought. Considering how thick I thought you were in the first place, that's no mean achievement. Looks like the hat was right to place you in Slytherin though, no Gryffindor could ever have come up with that. This was not proceeding anything like how Ron had imagined it. Now, if that was all you wanted? I would suggest you go back where you came from, before I let Hermione beat you up again. The resulting laughter from those that heard the exchange proved too much for Ron. Combined with his plan disintegrating before his eyes, it was too big a blow for his already fragile pride to accept. He drew his wand and quickly fired off a curse he'd heard the twins working on. Hermione though had her wand already in her hand and a shield charm raised before Ron got his curse off. It reflected straight back at him and everyone sat waiting to see what it would do. Unfortunately they didn't have long to wait. Ron attempted to fire off another curse but emitted an exceedingly loud belch as slugs started dripping off his bottom lip. They hit the floor with a plop at the exact same time everyone in the hall lost any appetite they had left. McGonagall was at the scene in seconds, transfiguring a plate into a bucket before handing it to Ron so he could catch the dripping slugs. She also banished the ones that had made it to the floor and were making their break for freedom. Mr. Weasley, as you are clearly in no condition to answer questions in your present state, I will send you to Madame Pomfrey and speak to you later on this matter. Rest assured, the firing of curses in the Great Hall will not go unpunished. Ron attempted to answer the professor. The resulting plops of 3 slugs passing out his mouth to hit the bucket told him that would be a bad idea. The audible groans of revulsion from all around him was not what he wanted to hear either. As he left the hall, Ron now had every pair of eyes on him. The problem with that, as far as Ron Weasley was concerned, was that he didn't want to be remembered as the boy who belched slugs into a bucket. Not nearly as cool a nickname as the boy who lived. That was a very nice shield charm, Mrs. Potter. I'm tempted to award points to Gryffindor, especially as there was no follow-on action this time. Minerva was glancing along her table, noticing Miss Bulstrode sitting beside Mr. Longbottom while Miss Abbott and Miss Bones were chatting to the other 2 Gryffindor girls. It was actually Lavender who answered her head of house. There was no need for any follow-on action, Professor. We all knew Hermione had it well in hand. Mr. Lupin taught us that shield charm last night. He and Auror Tonks were brilliant and we all learned so much. This statement was greeted by nods of agreement from all the first years. This gave Minerva a new candidate for the post, after its current occupant had fallen prey to the defense curse. She then turned her attention to Harry. I understand from Professor Flitwick that you wish to speak with me. Please come to my office after dinner. Hermione interrupted. Professor, Harry has Quidditch practice then. Would it be possible for you to join us for tea in our rooms after it? There is less chance of us being disturbed there. Hermione didn't want to come right out and say it, but the headmaster wouldn't be able to interrupt. Harry thought this was a very good idea and added one of his own. Please extend the same invitation to Professor Flitwick as well. We enjoyed his hospitality last evening and would like to return the favor. Minerva instantly agreed. Here was a chance to sit and chat with these 2. There would be no ulterior motive, other than trying to figure out the best way to help 2 of her cubs. Chapter 85, ch.74. Harry could see by the way she was looking at him that this was something she needed. It was almost like a confirmation that she wasn't going dark. The question he had to ask himself was, could he trade Ron's death for Molly's life, whatever that life was now? When she looked at him like that, he could deny her nothing. Okay love, I can live with that if you can. A repeat of their earlier kiss told him she could. Sometimes it was good to be Harry Potter. Harry could see the determination back in her eyes and was greatly relieved. He would have hated to go behind her back to deal with Ron. He would still have done it though. That image of him standing over a bruised and battered Hermione was burned into his brain. Only Ron's death had any chance of allowing it to fade. Oh Harry, we've been such terrible hosts. Luna and Ginny must be wondering where we are. Don't worry love, your mother was leading them away to watch The Little Mermaid. We better get some gillyweed in for Australia. The happy couple walked hand in hand down the stairs to rejoin their friends. Molly Weasley thought her new life sucked. She was irritable, sweating buckets from working in the intense heat and starting to get really pissed off at the way the local men ogled her as if she was the tastiest thing on the menu. Molly would be the first to admit she had never been what traditionally could be considered beautiful, Even as a teenager, her most flattering description had been that pleasantly plump girl. Unused to the attention, the stares of these men annoyed her even more. It was as if they were calculating how many camels she was worth. What really had her worried was that things were so bad between her and Arthur. The head of the Weasley family might accept if the offer was high enough. Bill's contacts had led them to a bar in Cairo, a bar that the owner was considering selling. It had a 3-bedroom flat above the bar and plenty of room for an extension out the back. They had haggled for hours before reaching a compromise. They would run the bar for 6 weeks with the option to buy at the end of it. Molly was now working wherever she was needed, be it in the kitchen or behind the bar. All 3 Weasleys could see this was a terrific opportunity to earn a living, with accommodation already available. Financially it would take all they had and require a massive effort from the entire family, but here was their way back to being able to hold their heads up again. Owning your own business was not to be sneezed at, even if it was just a bar in downtown Cairo. The owl that arrived from Muriel highlighted exactly how tenuous their position was. But Arthur, we have to go back, or at least I do. How can we sleep at night not knowing what happened to our son? Arthur was not for moving, our son who chose to run away over a stupid badge and a girl he hadn't even spoken to. We're barely managing here with the 3 of us working flat out. When you take in the expense of a trip home and hiring someone to replace you, then I have to say no. Molly was now crying as Arthur further explained his decision. The future of our whole family now rests on this venture. We need to save enough gold to bring them all here for the summer and pay their next year's tuition at Hogwarts, a year that will see Ginny joining the boys. I'm really sorry, Molly, but it has to be this way. I'll write to Charlie and see if he can get a couple of days off. He's much closer anyway. Bill gave his opinion. It actually matched his father's. If there was something we could do to help, this decision would be different. There's nothing we can do that the Ministry and Dumbledore won't already be doing. Muriel's there, and if Charlie can get over for a few days, then that's the best we can accomplish for now. Percy acting like a love-lost teen is certainly unexpected, but it's always the quiet ones. Arthur understood this was extremely hard for Molly. It was not an easy decision for him to make either. By the time we got there, Percy could even have been found. If not, we know he's a resourceful young man who knows how to look after himself. With his first display of kindness since this situation blew up on them, Arthur placed his arm around his wife's shoulders. He's run away from home, Molly. Young men have been doing that since the beginning of time. Britain is a much safer place now, and he knows how to use his wand. He'll be fine. Molly could see their point of view. The mother in her didn't agree with it for a second, but she could still see it. One of her babies was lost, and she wouldn't be happy until she was crushing him in her arms again, closely followed by the rollicking of his life. She asked her husband for the only thing she knew that could bring her some comfort. Arthur, could we ask Muriel to ship my clock out to us? We can tinker with it and try to get it working properly again. I would feel much better if I could at least see their hands on the clock. Arthur understood how much it was costing Molly not to be racing back to Britain. He had been quite hard on her recently, and this was a perfectly reasonable request. Okay, Molly, I'll write to Charlie first. If he's going to Britain, he could collect it from Muriel. It'll get here quicker if he ships it from Romania. With a quick letter penned and sent to Charlie, the 3 Weasleys got back to work. Chapter 86, ch.87. Sirius was waiting in a specially prepared room, deep inside Gringotts Bank. Barcloak and 2 armed goblin guards were also present as they awaited their visitor. Sirius had been certain that they would wait until the last possible moment before making an appearance. As the walls of the room changed color when Narcissa Malfoy entered, Sirius and Barcloak shared a grin that their trap had been well and truly sprung. He'd guessed correctly, and now the marauder could put his plan into operation. Narcissa Malfoy sat across the small table from Sirius. Her tight derriere had no sooner touched the seat when 2 goblin blades appeared either side of her neck. This is an outrage. The minister is a close personal friend of my husband. I shall make sure he hears of this. Sirius was shaking his head, answering the claims as if dealing with a petulant child. Tut, 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 Lucius. You of all people should know that attempting to conduct business inside Gringotts while impersonating someone else carries very severe penalties. Now you can admit this, which will allow us to discuss your rather limited options, or we can sit back and wait for the polyjuice to wear off. I should point out that should you choose the second option, I will be powerless to help you. Once you change back, you will be led from here to a Gringotts dungeon and probably never see the light of day again. Narcissus/Lucius was sweating now. You can't do this to me, Black. Sirius was the epitome of cool, again acting as if he was explaining the facts of the situation to a simple child. But my dear Lucius, I'm not doing anything. You did this to yourself when you entered this building in that disguise. That dress and those heels will be mightily uncomfortable once you revert back, unless you're into that kind of thing. Sirius raised a questioning eyebrow as his guest attempted to control their temper. Lucius realized the hopelessness of the situation. Hard not to with two razor-sharp blades next to your throat. Admitting nothing yet, he decided to see what this was really about. What is it you actually want, Black? Time to get down to business. Sirius put his serious face on. All pretense was now gone. I want to protect my godson from the monster who killed his parents. You are going to help me do that. You have in your possession a little black book that has TM riddle printed on it. Give it to me and all your troubles can be forgotten. Lucius was trying to think fast. No one other than his master knew he had that item. How did Black find out? More importantly, how was he going to turn the tables on the former Gryffindor? Very well, I'll fetch the book for you. Sirius smiled at the figure across from him. I knew you would see sense, but there's no reason for you to travel all the way back to Malfoy Manor to collect it. The truth is, if that book's not in my hands by the time that potion wears off, I will no longer be able to help you. Still, it should be easier dealing with cousin Narcissa with you out of the picture. A hard edge crept into his voice as Sirius reinforced who was in charge here. Call your house elf and have him collect it. Remember, you're on the clock. Lucius was still trying to calculate a way out of this, until he managed to get himself out of this room, though Black held all the cards. Even giving the book to Black, he could always retrieve it at a later date. If the polyjuice ran out, then it was all over. Dobby. The downtrodden little elf appeared in an instant. Lucius then provided precise instructions on how to retrieve the item in question. Dobby returned under a minute later and couldn't put the book down onto the table fast enough. It was almost as if the thing had burned his fingers. Sirius of course couldn't resist going for those bonus points from his godson and his wife. Now Lucius, for having the audacity to turn up here as my cousin, it will cost you. Give Dobby clothes now. Lucius was livid. It looked an even stranger expression on Narcissa's face. Sirius got the feeling he was seconds away from telling him he would rue the day he crossed Lucius Malfoy. Instead, he handed the astonished but delighted Dobby a glove. The little elf was now bouncing up and down on the spot with unabashed glee. Dobby is thanking you very much, Master Black. Dobby should have known that someone who was the godfather of the great Harry Potter would have to be great themselves. The happiest elf in the entire world popped out of Gringotts. Barkhoke had confirmed that the diary was the genuine article before Dobby had been given clothes. The goblin now left the room with it to see the evil thing dealt with. Lucius was so engrossed in watching the book be taken away from him that it didn't even register that the other two guards had left as well. When it finally sunk in that there were only the two of them in the room, Black already had his wand out while his was still inside Narcissa's handbag. A calm feeling then came over his mind as all his troubles were forgotten about. He no longer had a care in the world, except to follow the instructions the voice was placing in his head. Chapter 87, ch.75. Dan and Emma didn't benefit from the kids using Hermione's new portkey to Hogwarts. They still had to drive Ginny and Luna to the Leaky Cauldron so the girls could fly home. They had just entered the bar when Ginny let out an ear-piercing scream before pouncing on a red-headed man. Cries of Charlie left no one in any doubt who this was. Charlie was spinning Ginny around, but his mind was spinning at a much higher rate of knots as he tried to get a fix on what the hell was going on. He'd heard from Zeno that both girls were spending the weekend with these people, then his baby sister walks in looking a million galleons and happier than he'd seen her. She also dropped a rucksack that was obviously new and appeared to be bursting at the seams. He was dragged over by Ginny to be introduced. "You know Luna, this is Emma and Dan Granger. They're Hermione's parents and I suppose Harry's too." Charlie didn't understand the situation, but that was no excuse for displaying bad manners. "Hi Luna, Mr. and Mrs. Granger, I'm Charlie Weasley." Dan shook the young man's hand without hesitation. "Are you the brother who Ginny tells us works with dragons?" Charlie instantly liked these people. Anyone who could make his sister smile like that got a big thumbs up in his book. "Yes, on a dragon reserve in Romania. I'm in London to see this little one before heading up to Scotland and visiting Hogwarts. We're trying to discover what's happened to Percy." Emma felt terrible and didn't know what to say. "Oh, we haven't met him yet. Fred and George are a lot of fun though." This had Charlie even more confused until Ginny began to tell him about her weekend. Dan smiled as he interrupted the bubbly girl. "We'll leave you two with Charlie and see you next Saturday." Luna immediately hugged them both goodbye and Ginny quickly followed her best friend's example. Charlie's inbuilt manners took over again. "Thanks for taking the girls, it's easy to see they had a good time." Emma beamed a smile at the girls. "Oh, it was no trouble, it was a pleasure to have them. We'll be neighbors soon anyway and our door will always be open." Charlie was left wondering just how far out of the loop he was as the couple left the pub. He intended to get some answers from Ginny before heading off to Hogwarts. He had thought the Potters were the bad guys here. If that was the case, they had a hell of a way of showing it. It was with an air of trepidation that the Potters entered the Great Hall on Monday morning. Part of them was waiting on someone screaming murderers at them. Instead, what they got was a warmer reception than Harry remembered from winning Quidditch matches. The fact that it came from all four houses made it that bit more special. It left them thinking that perhaps things could be changed for the better. As Hermione sat down at the Gryffindor table, Harry headed for the staff one. He handed McGonagall a letter. "Professor, we will require to be out of school tomorrow on legal business. This is our notification in writing." Dumbledore almost choked on his food. Obviously he was listening to every word. "Nothing too serious, I hope?" Minerva asked. Harry smiled at her. As much fun as it would be to bait Dumbledore some more, he decided the truth could work just as well here. "Well, Professor, if things go the way our lawyers expect them to, I'll have new parents by tomorrow evening." McGonagall actually returned his smile. "I'm really pleased to hear that, Mr. Potter. I was against you being left with those relatives from the very beginning." Harry was onto that comment in a flash. "Would you mind telling our lawyers that, Professor? They're determined to get to the bottom of why I was abandoned on that doorstep. Every little scrap of information helps them build their case." Dumbledore's face now bore the look of someone being told the waiter had taken a piss in their half-eaten lasagna. It certainly curtailed his appetite. "That would be no problem, Mr. Potter. What time would suit them?" "Professor, for what I'm paying them they will come when you say it's convenient." Harry handed her their lawyer's card before turning to find Hermione gossiping with Lavender and Parvati. Wonders will never cease. With the amount of blushing Neville was doing, Harry figured he must be featuring somewhere in the gossip. Wood stopped him before he had time to sit down, informing Harry there was Quidditch practice on Mondays and Thursdays. Thanks to Hermione's porte-carte, they would be able to return home after the practice to get ready for tomorrow's hearing. Harry didn't feel too guilty that his chances of being here when the first match was due to be played were very slim. If things worked out the way they hoped, missing Quidditch wouldn't make his list of things to be concerned about. It was after all only a game, played in a school competition. After what he had seen and done, it wasn't worth getting upset over. He sat next to Neville, hoping to discover why his face was so red before they had to leave for herbology. Chapter 88, ch.88. The minister's secretary was unsure how to deal with this. Lucius Malfoy no longer had unlimited access to the minister, but she hadn't been appraised of the situation regarding Mrs. Malfoy. This moment of confusion was put to good use. "Don't worry about it, dear. Cornelius will want to see me. I won't take up too much of his time." As the blonde woman entered the minister's office, something about this situation was bothering the secretary. After thinking about it for a few moments, she decided to err on the side of safety. She pressed the button on her desk to summon some help. Both the Aurors who quickly arrived agreed with the secretary's assessment of the situation. They decided to enter the minister's office after he didn't answer to their knock on the door. The sight that greeted them froze both experienced officers. Neither had seen anything like this. The minister was conscious but being held in a full-body bind while a dress-wearing Lucius Malfoy was attempting to loosen the clearly terrified Fudge's robes. Two stunners blasted Malfoy into a wall before a finite released the minister. Cornelius drew a deep, steadying breath before kicking Lucius Malfoy as hard as he could in the face. The two Aurors were now physically restraining the struggling minister for magic as he attempted to repeat the feat on the unconscious body. Cornelius was ranting, raving, and swearing at the top of his voice as he swung his foot and missed again. This also had the effect of quickly drawing a crowd. It was only after Amelia entered that Cornelius regained some of his composure. "Amelia, I want that piece of filth leaking veritaserum from every pore. Everything this bastard has ever done I want down on parchment. Destroy him and arrest anyone else he names as a Death Eater. I was deluding myself these bastards could ever become upstanding members of our community. Bring them all down, anything you need is yours for the asking." Amelia could have kissed Fudge, or at least let him have a few more kicks at Lucius. Her instructions were to destroy Malfoy. Pictures of him in that dress on the front of the Prophet would do that job nicely. Saying that he attempted to assault the minister and got his nose broke for his troubles would also show Cornelius in a good light. Amelia was feeling particularly generous toward the minister at the moment. She immediately cancelled all Auror leave and recalled all off-duty officers. The next 24 hours would change their world forever. Harry was at Quidditch practice when a loud whoop from Hermione sitting in the stands caught his attention. Seeing her excitingly holding a letter that Hedwig had obviously just delivered had him flying over there like a bullet. The bollocking he was sure to receive from Oliver for abandoning practice and snogging his wife senseless would be well worth it. The note had simply said, "Enjoy your bacon sandwiches tomorrow while reading The Prophet. Strangest house elf in the world seeks employment." The enclosed advert for a tattoo parlor left no doubt that Sirius had accomplished his mission. They would read about it tomorrow before getting the full story from Sirius firsthand tomorrow night. The couple were unaware that there were other arrangements afoot tomorrow night. Emma Granger's Operation Teddy had its first phase revealed. It was later that night as the two professors were leaving the Potter's room that they had a chance to chat in private about their evening. "Well, Minnie, what do you make of it?" She didn't even have to think about her answer. This could potentially be the biggest step forward for our community in living memory. What makes it all the more astonishing is that neither of them seem to be aware of what they've accomplished here. "I can't help but smile when I see Miss Bulstrode sitting at the Gryffindor table. Care to wager that the Potters will be the first to sit with their friends at the Slytherin table?" Phileas wasn't biting. "Oh, I don't think you will get any takers for that bet." The news of them building another home in Australia was quite worrying though. "They've been such a joy to teach, I would hate to lose them. You and me both, my friend." The impact they've had on Hogwarts has been huge, in such a short space of time too. Albus seems to think that would be an unmitigated disaster. I don't know his reasoning, but I now tend to agree with that. We are witnessing something pretty amazing here. I don't know that it would continue if they left the country, and I hope we don't have to find out the answer to that. Both Granger parents are closely monitoring the situation, and Sirius will do whatever is necessary to protect the young couple. Chapter 89, ch.89. Phileas appeared to consider this for a moment before replying, "Things can't be allowed to return to the way they were. You know, I've often wondered if the house system is divisive. The hat attaches labels to 11-year-old children that follow them for the rest of their lives. I know I was a different person at 16 than I was at 11. I've long advocated dividing the students by year group rather than houses. A junior, middle, and upper house makes much more sense to me. That way we would get to know all the students over their 7 years here, instead of just a quarter of them." This was something that she and Phileas had discussed on more than one occasion. I can understand your argument, Phileas, but we would be losing the House Cup and the Quidditch matches. Phileas had his answer prepared though, both of which are very divisive to the school. The Potters have shown us a vision of the future, and that's the way I think we should be looking. Our current first years are integrating, irrespective of houses or bloodlines. That is a future I have dreamed about for years. We've been granted a unique opportunity here to see how things could be, don't you prefer it? Her little friend's argument was more potent than at any other time because of what was happening in Hogwarts at the moment. Of course I prefer it. What we need to ask though is, should we discard 1,000 years of history, because of something that may be nothing more than a passing fad? Phileas was well aware the Potters were exposing the cracks in her argument. He pressed home his advantage. A fad that would rid future Dark Lords of their ability to so easily promote hatred and recruit gullible followers. Anything that turns the spotlight onto the bigotry and lies spouted by the purebloods is all good in my book. It can be no coincidence that the only first years against this are all Slytherin purebloods. They are wrong, but nothing appears to be able to convince them of that. The phrase blind prejudice springs to mind. As they had now reached Minerva's quarters, she bade her friend good night. There was much to think on. Neither professor noticed the headmaster melt from the shadows. He'd been listening to every word since they left the Potters. Another home in Australia for the Potters chilled him to the bone, forcing him to curtail any and all manipulations regarding them for now. The Potters had almost nonchalantly dealt with the Weasley boy this morning. Longbottom's altercation with the Malfoy heir had defanged little blonde Ponce. If Harry was half as good at Quidditch as Minerva alluded to, his popularity would be unstoppable. His master plan to keep the boy ignorant of the magical world had backfired spectacularly. Instead of being filled with wonder and awe, he and his wife were questioning everything. Worse still, they were encouraging others to do the same. They just had two heads of house to tea. Another was so afraid of what they might say, he checked with the Potters before accepting the post. Given that the missing member went into raptures every time she spoke about how the first years were behaving like Hufflepuffs, Albus thought it was safe to assume the Potters had the full set of heads of house in their camp. With even Hagrid thinking twice before proclaiming Great Man Dumbledore. He felt his nightmare of becoming Albus Nobody was getting closer and closer all the time. He gave a little laugh that wasn't that far removed from a sob. Albus Dumbledore was reduced to sulking along the corridors while invisible, trying to discover what was happening in his school. These were changed days indeed. Back inside their room, a pair of Gryffindors were chuckling out loud. They watched as the dot labeled Dumbledore followed on behind the two professors that had just left their room. They'd noticed him on the map earlier, hanging around outside their door. They hoped either Minerva or Phileas mentioned their new house going to be built in Australia. After all, that was why they brought the subject up. They needed to keep Albus off balance for at least another few weeks. That piece of news should put paid to any plans he had for them at the moment. Molly loved her new clock, apart from Ronald's hand still pointing at mortal peril. After discussing this, they had decided it must be the fact that a Weasley was in Slytherin, and the clock understood this wasn't right. With Ginny's clearly stating home, the twins pointing at school and everyone else indicating work, Molly was at least assured the rest of his family were all right. Chapter 90, ch.90. Sirius was eagerly awaiting his copy of this morning's Prophet. Yesterday had felt so good, and he was now looking forward to his blind date tonight. Instead of an owl though, Sirius found himself having to answer the door where all thoughts of his date swiftly flew away. Amelia Bones was standing there with a couple of Aurors as backup. Sirius had no other option but to invite them in. Dan and Emma greeted their visitors warily. Amelia's tone alerted all three residents that this was not a social call. "Lord Black, can I ask you when was the last time you saw Lucius Malfoy?" Sirius could answer with total honesty, "Madam Bones, I have not laid eyes on that blonde arsewipe since before I was illegally placed in Azkaban. I also have no desire to break that run of good luck anytime soon. Could I ask what brought you here and why the question was asked?" "We currently have Lucius Malfoy in custody. He claims you must have placed him under the Imperius curse yesterday." Can I ask you to give me an account of your movements up until about 4 o'clock yesterday? Sirius appeared unconcerned, so he's resorting to the same excuse he used last time. I really thought he had more originality than that. I wonder if he has enough gold to escape Azkaban this time? I don't know what he's done, but I intend to see that he doesn't. Yesterday I was in Gringotts for most of the afternoon conducting Black family business. I met briefly with Narcissa in that time, which probably explains his claims. I'm revoking their marriage and claiming back the bride price, since we all know her husband is a Death Eater. I also promised to cast her out the Black family the second the marriage is dissolved. I've already done the same to that psycho bitch Bellatrix. Amelia had to tread carefully. She didn't want to upset a man who the ministry had already treated badly. Something just didn't sit right with this case though. Could the Narcissa that you met possibly have been Lucius under the influence of polyjuice potion? Sirius paused for a moment before answering. It's possible. I haven't seen her for many years and would put any differences down to that. The meeting took place in a room in Gringotts though. That would be a hell of a risk to take. You do know what happens to people who try to deceive the goblins? She left well before I did, cursing my name because she would no longer have one. The papers dissolving her marriage should have cleared yesterday, allowing her to be cast out of the Black family today. Amelia could understand that would be something the Malfoys would be desperate to avoid. Would they really concoct something this elaborate though? All Lucius had revealed about the incident was that he had set off to meet Sirius, and the next thing he remembers is waking up in custody. Even under truth serum they couldn't get any more out of him. Amelia really didn't want to ask this next question but realized she must. Lord Black, please may I check your wand? Sirius again took a moment before answering. I can understand why you're asking, Madam Bones, and can't help wishing you were in charge when I was dumped in Azkaban. I will allow you to check my wand in order to clear myself from this investigation. Amelia accepted his wand gratefully, along with his reasoning. She was surprised to see the last 6 spells cast were all household spells and couldn't help but say so. Both Grangers had kept quiet, realizing that they were out of their depth here. Emma, though, thought she could help with this. That would be my fault. The whole family is moving to a new home next weekend and I was starting to panic about the work we still had to do. Sirius gave us a demonstration of how much easier it is to clean and pack when you can use magic. You've no idea how relieved I was after seeing that. This got Amelia's attention. Can I ask where you're moving to? Dan was getting fed up with these people turning up at his door whenever it suited them and didn't even try to hide his annoyance. Can I ask why you want that information? I was actually looking forward to a bit of peace and quiet. Sirius not only backed him up, but let Lord Black out to play as he took his wand back from Amelia. Last time I looked, supplying a forwarding address to the ministry was not an actual requirement when moving house. Madam Bones, I have cooperated fully with your investigation. If there is nothing else, then we'd like to have our breakfast without an aura guard. Amelia was forced to put up or shut up. Since she had nothing, there was only one option open to her. My apologies for disturbing your morning, and I would like to thank you for your cooperation, Lord Black. This closes the last avenue available for Lucius Malfoy to escape being punished. I think it's fair to say you won't be seeing him for quite a number of years yet. Please excuse my forwardness over your moving house. Being inherently nosy is a requirement of my job. I just try to always be thorough. Sirius relaxed his tone. If you want to be thorough, Amelia, I'll give you something that requires investigation. Barty Couch brought his wife into the prison to visit their son, highly illegal, and days later both mother and son were dead. The son was apparently in good health beforehand, and of course there was no investigation. That's always smelled bad to me. He could see from Amelia's raised eyebrows that she thought it was highly coincidental as well. Sirius of course had been told that Junior was currently living at home, hidden under an invisibility cloak while being guarded by a house elf. Sirius was determined to help the kids any way he could. Getting rid of Crouch would definitely be a plus. Amelia left the Grangers with more questions than she arrived with, not something she had anticipated when she knocked on their door. That the Potters were moving home was a concern, but she had no right to demand their new address. She was sure she could soon discover it if she looked hard enough. Unfortunately, she was going to be very busy for the foreseeable future. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.